Alright, well, hello everybody. I'm back. I know I haven't uploaded anything for a while. What has it been? 3 weeks or something? Too long. Either way, let's get to it, okay? I'm not gonna waste any more time because I know that the main thing that you all have been, if you've all been waiting for anything, I'm sure it's just more Magic content. So I won't bore you with I'll try to keep it quick. So yeah, so this is going to be another kind of what am I playing now type video. I've been tinkering with the new cards, and definitely the new Kamigawa set has made a splash. So I kind of want to go over how that's affected things, and also like how the meta shifted a little bit. Maybe I'll sprinkle that in there, and just kind of what how this has affected the decks, and how like I kind of feel like the optimal build of each deck is at the moment. So without any further ado, let's get to it. Let's start off with the mono black build. Oh yeah, and this one, I don't think this will have any gameplay appended to it, but I do have at least some videos recorded for all of this. Some of it doesn't have commentary. Actually, most of it doesn't have commentary, so I'll have to dub over it. Some of it may actually. I haven't been keeping a lot of track, but I definitely haven't been able to process much of it. But either way, let's start with the mono black deck, shall we? So without further ado, mono black deck. And I know I've been overdue with this deck, but eventually I will have something up on the alternate channel. But yeah, I think it'll be the alternate channel. I could just start putting it to the main channel, but either way. So what's going on here? Okay, so the biggest splash here actually is March of Wretched Sorrow. I actually did try Takenuma, Abandoned Mine a little bit in this deck. The biggest issue is, and I'll get to this in a second, is that you need a healthy amount of basic lands, both for Field of Ruin and to avoid opposing Blood Moons. So even though this is a really sweet effect and it's mostly upside, and I do have a copy here for if I tweak the deck to where I feel like this is where I want to be. But yeah, I mean, it sucks because this is a really cool effect, but yeah, where I'm at right now, I'm not really playing Takenuma. Or what do you call it? Or Urborg for that matter, even though Urborg seems like a free roll. The basic land count is kind of important, again, both for Blood Moon and for having enough lands to fetch out with Field of Ruin. But I'd say the biggest effect, the biggest splash in this deck that the new Kamigawa set has made is March of Wretched Sorrow. And I feel like this card actually does a lot for the deck, because we really needed an extra source of life gain in the deck, because the deck actually did have a really good ability to control the board and to deal with opposing creatures, and even to some extent planeswalkers like Murderous Rider. Of course, Lurrus has been banned actually, so I guess this is another elephant in the room. So no Lurrus here, and that means actually we can go back to playing Murderous Rider, and for that matter, Liliana if we can afford her. Thankfully we can. For anybody who can't, Gatekeeper and Malakar is basically the same thing. Honestly, it doesn't change your win percentage that much. This is almost as good as in some matchups, like particularly the super aggressive ones, like against goblins. Hands down, this is better because most of the time Liliana is just going to eat a goblin, counter swing anyway. But Gatekeeper and Malakar, at least, if they swing in, Gatekeeper usually eats a goblin or trades with a goblin or something in the process, whereas Liliana just eats it and dies. So but I'd say in more matchups, having a planeswalker that sticks around is generally better than having a 2/2 creature, which is why, plus you can play this on an empty board and just start ticking up, particularly against control opponents, which Gatekeeper as a 2/2 does not quite put as much pressure on. So, I would recommend Lily if you can afford her, but, there's enough matchups where Gatekeeper is honestly better that, don't feel bad at all about playing Gatekeeper. And, in fact, ironically, I think actually my best win, I think I went 4-1 once or twice with this deck, and both times it was actually playing the budget version with Gatekeeper. But just because I happen to have a better record, I think the best one so far with Liliana has been a 3-2. But just because my best record so far has been with the budget version, it doesn't mean that the budget version is better. I think it's not a good idea to be quote results oriented unquote. You have to you can't compare apples and oranges. Like so the results. Being results oriented, it only counts if you're comparing the same type of results, and obviously very different matchups affect things differently. I will tell you, Liliana has super shined in the control matchups, whereas Gatekeeper, we're honestly a little bit soft to control without Liliana. I mean, yeah, we've got Turok, but just Turok alone, these control decks have gotten super strong. So just Turok alone, I don't think just quite does it anymore. Turok plus Lily though definitely can. But either way, let's get back to March of Wretched Sorrow. Excuse me, I don't have a script. I want to get a video out there, so please excuse me if I'm rambling a little bit. But March of Wretched Sorrow. You know, I feel like this deck has, I feel like this card has added a lot to the deck, and it's shaped how the deck is built, and I think it does help the deck continue to compete, and maybe even this will improve the win rate when I really get the hang of both playing this deck more and possibly tweaking it further. But as of right now, I feel fairly confident that this is probably more or less the optimal build that we want to have. But either way, March of Wretched Sorrow, you know, there's definitely a lot of play to this because, you know, you always have the option to pitch stuff early on. You can sink a lot of mana to it later in the game. And I think the option to pitch stuff is particularly interesting because whereas in a lot of decks, pitching stuff is just card disadvantage, the fact that in this deck, both because of Castle Lockthwain and Nice Whisperer, which I'll get to that in a little bit, but because this deck effectively trades life points for extra cards, it means that if we pitch something to March of Wretched Sorrow, it doesn't necessarily mean we're at card disadvantage. I mean, we do go card disadvantage a little bit earlier on, but later in the game, that extra life can and will, hopefully, if we've controlled the game sufficiently, translate into additional cards. So yeah. But so here's the thing about March of Wretched Sorrow. I've always felt like I've needed a little extra source of not card advantage, of life gain, in the deck. But you know, and so in the past I've had like I've had Cling to Dust kind of in this slot, and while Cling to Dust is a solid card, it's also additional Grave Hate. Cling to Dust, it's not really that great of a life gain card, to be honest. Yes, it is good in Burn, but honestly, I mean, it's good as a life gain spell in Burn, but honestly, outside of Burn, I just never really found myself using it for the life gain function that much, because 1 mana gain 3 life, or even out of the graveyard for 4 mana and not having to go down a card, it's a little bit rough, either paying 1 and not, you know, drawing a card or something, and gaining a 3 life. It's a little hard to either spend a whole card and only get life, or to spend 4 mana, even if you're not trading a card for playing it out of your graveyard. But it's just hard to justify either 4 mana and no card and gain 3 life, or 1 mana and a card if you're playing it from your hand. March of Wretched Sorrow doesn't have that problem because you will, if this is going according to plan, you do tag something, either a creature, but you'd be surprised how often it also can tag a planeswalker, particularly if you pitch cards, and sometimes it's worth pitching 2 or 3 cards in the hand to get like a Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, something off the battlefield. It's definitely nice to have that option, but the fact that March of Wretched Sorrow, you know, it gains life in a pinch, and you don't have to go down a card in the process of doing so because you trade with a creature or planeswalker. It's kind of huge, and you can also gain a lot of life with this, way more than just 3, sometimes, particularly later in the game. And that's kind of huge, and I feel like that means that we are actually gaining a lot more life on average per game than we were when we had Cling to Dust. And another thing, too, is now that we've got another reliable source of life gain, which can, again, fuel further card draw with the Castle Lockthwain in particular, which is kind of one of the main draws to playing the deck, to be honest. We also get to play Relic of Regenitus if we're not playing Cling to Dust, because this is hands down the most powerful graveyard hate effect we can be playing. The only problem is it was kind of a Namba with Cling, which forced us to play Nail Spellbomb, which there is some matchups where Nail Spellbomb is kind of better, but a lot of times that gets counteracted when they bring in Leyline of Sanctity. And yeah, we can juice Blackstone up to 4 to deal with Leyline, but you know, honestly, the best way to deal with Leyline is just not to just to have the deck be less vulnerable to it overall, and not have it incidentally shut off everything. And you know, March of Wretched Sorrow doesn't target the player, so there is that. It does go a little further on. Other than that, yeah, we're still on our trusty Blackstone. Yeah, I've played Urza Saga again. But you know, just like before when I dabble with Urza Saga, Urza Saga's not a bad card. But there's 2 reasons why I don't think, even if you, and it's not for a budget reason that I'm opting not to play Urza Saga, I just don't think Urza Saga is at its best in this deck. And it's not really so much that Urza Saga is a bad card per se, but there's 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is that Urza Saga sometimes only makes kind of like 1 token. Sometimes it doesn't even make 1 token, which is okay. I mean, you can go fetch Relic or something, but like a lot of times, Urza Saga, you know, makes only like 1 token, sometimes 0 tokens, because this deck, because of Castle Lockthwain, kind of wants to empty its hand every turn if possible. I mean, it kind of wants to, like, you know, it kind of, yeah, it just wants to empty its hand kind of a lot of times. And, you know, taking a few turns off making tokens, I mean, obviously that can lead to virtual card advantage in that way. But then, you know, if they play something like Ratchet Bomb or Engineer Explosives or Dress Down or something, and they deal with the tokens, and there's a surprising amount of stuff that can wipe the tokens, you know, then you just spend a few turns. You're not really up card advantage, and then and they're just so far behind with actually abusing Castle Lochthwain. You know, that a lot of times with Urza Saga, I find myself just not really making tokens. And at that point, yeah, you cash it out for some type of value artifact later on. Sometimes it does mana screw you too, though, where you can't actually cast your Turok on curve. You're generally waiting till they're generally the last land you play, because of Turok is your curve topper. And this is such an insane card. I definitely would not recommend leaving home without it. You know, it's a 3-for-1 and a disruptive one at that. So it kind of allows us to get away with not playing Thoughtseize too, which Thoughtseize is kind of bad late in the game because you lose 2 life and may not even take a card. But anyway, the point is yeah, I just don't think Urza Saga is where it's at. It doesn't do its best in this type of deck, and whereas Urza Saga is not at its best, I feel like Blackstone kind of is at its best in this deck. Black never had that great artifact or enchant removal. It's getting a little bit better enchant removal these days, but it's still not at its best. And Blackstone, just like in the red decks, it's just kind of really good incidental. Kind of, hey, we don't really play many 1-drops besides Relic, which we can cycle away anyway. So like, yeah, Blackstone just does a lot of work. It deals with artifacts and enchantments. It deals with 1-drop creatures. It can deal with 2-drops or more. It can clear the board. You know, it can even deal with multiple stuff at the same time as all while tapping for colorless. Very underrated card. I am playing Field of Ruin this time, and while this might look like too many colorless sources, the thing to keep in mind is we do have 16 black sources, which is actually quite a bit. We got 24 lands total, but 16 black sources. I think that's so far it's felt like pretty reliable to cast Liliana on turn 3. Sometimes it can become an issue having 3 black by turn 4, which we'll need for Turok. But it hasn't really been that much of an issue so far. I mean, eventually I will, but I don't think that alone is going to deter me not to play Field of Ruin. And one of the cool things about Field of Ruin is, unlike Blaststone, this has a certain built-in kind of fixing component to it. So like, even if we can't get to 3 black by turn 4, assuming that we have like, say, 2 swamps and 2 Field of Ruins, or 2 swamps, 1 Field of Ruin, 1 Blaststone, that does actually lead to 3 black on turn 4. It just requires us to blow Field of Ruin on some kind of non-basic the opponent has, which they almost always do have. And so we can kind of downgrade their mana for a turn and upgrade ours, and then we can play our Turok, which, sometimes we would have rather played like a Lily or something on turn 3. Sometimes not, but, the fact of the matter is the fact that it can cash itself in to color fix by turn 4 when we kind of need it the most for the most black intensive card in the deck, I think makes it generally worthwhile. Other than that, what else is there to say? This is pretty standard cards for the archetype. I love Inquisition's still the best. It's not Thoughtseize, so like we can fire this off in Impunity later in the game. It's kind of important when we gotta empty our hand for Castle Lochthwain. We draw Inquisition, whether they have something in their hand or not, we can just fire it out of our hand, and then we can continue Castle Lochthwain without taking extra damage. That's why I favor Inquisition over Thoughtseize in this deck, and that's also why I favor Collective Brutality over Thoughtseize. But Collective Brutality also affects the board, can also gain some extra life in a pinch, which again can also translate into more cards thanks to Castle Lochthwain. I really like it. It also hits instants or sorceries, which is kind of important, so it can supplement Inquisition. I think that these 8 cards are enough targeted discard that we need in this deck. I haven't found myself particularly wanting for much more. This completely main deckable card, I love it, particularly in this deck where, again, and I'll just keep saying this, but where extra life can play into extra cards. I definitely feel like if there is a deck that wants to main deck this, we're probably close to the top of that list. We don't have Bloodghast anymore for, pitching it for extra value, but, still well worth it in my opinion. Night's Whisper. This could have been something like Bloodghast, or, I've experimented with different cards in the slot. I like Night's Whisper, and one of the reasons why is that it helps color fix. There's Sign in Blood, which I actually used to like Sign in Blood a lot when I didn't have many colorless utility lands, but Night's Whisper is just really great. It's the colorless as opposed to Sign in Blood, which is 2 black target player. Draws 2 cards and loses 2 life, which is basically the exact same thing, just you can finish them off with it, which almost never comes up, but it does happen sometimes. But Night's Whisper is it's just a really solid card. And the reason why I like Night's Whisper, as opposed to, for example, something like Dark Confidant, is that it's guaranteed to help you dig further in your deck and to help you hit your land drops. And where even though we have 24 lands, you'd be surprised how often we're missing our 3rd land drop, or missing our 4th land drop, or something like that. In a deck like this, where we really gotta curve out to 4, kind of on cue if possible. I just find that Night's Whisper drawing 2 cards, you know, as opposed to 1, like being like, you know, as opposed to like Cling to Dust, which is kind of taking Cling to Dust spot. The fact that it can dig 2 cards deep, and the fact that it costs, you know, only 1 black as opposed to 2 like Sign in Blood, and the fact that it's guaranteed basically unless they play a counter spell. They can't just play like Fatal Push or Lightning Bolt like they can on Dark Confidant to prevent you from digging, which even then Dark Confidant on your upkeep only digs 1 card deeper. But yeah, the fact that it digs 2 cards deep and it's basically guaranteed unless they counter it. It's just very huge for hitting land drops while also getting card advantage, and particularly in this deck where life gain is much more prevalent and a much bigger fixture of your average game, particularly thanks to March of Wretched Sorrow, but to a lesser extent, Collective Brutality, and Murder Strider too, of course. Just, you know, Dice Whisperer has been a card that, I granted, this is my most recent edition. I think I've only played 1 league with it so far, but I was impressed when I did see it, and I felt like if I lost, sometimes it was simply because I didn't see more Nice Whispers, or I didn't see them early enough. You know, but generally, the earlier I see these, and the more of them I see, and it's kind of like expressive iteration. I feel like, though, you know, like the games where they chain expressive iteration together, I mean, multiple of those together, it's better for them. I feel like chaining multiple of these together oftentimes is good news for me. And again, a lot of that's thanks to the fact that I can gain a lot of life back with March. If not, the life loss might just add up too much, but thankfully, yeah, March does go a long way. I just feel like March does a lot for this deck, particularly, again, because of Castle Lockthwain. Turok, kind of already explained it, you know, Disruption, large body. A lot of times they do actually have extra cards in their hand later in the game, so boom. Get a large body, get a 3-for-1, and it disrupts your opponent. And a lot of times, you know, they've only got like a few cards left in their hand, so a lot of times you take their kind of critical card that they were hoping to get you with. Like you might take a Turok from them, ironically. So being on the play actually is a super important thing in the mirror match, both because you can Inquisition their Inquisition, and your Turok might snag their Turok they were trying to take on, you know, they were trying to hit you with. But anyway, yeah, Lily on a Veil, I think what I explained is better than Gatekeeper if you can afford it, for the most part, because A, you can play it on an empty board, and then start taking up, which is also valuable because you can get rid of extra lands or other things that are preventing you from gaining cards with Castle Lockthwain while taking minimal damage. It also leaves behind a Planeswalker that can continue to gain value by either ticking up or by down-ticking again later on, so, you know. But Gatekeeper, like I said, does have its advantages, particularly against super aggro decks, where they're going to be attacking a lot, and just having an extra 2/2 body that you can trade with an attacker might be better than a Planeswalker that just eats the attacker and then dies. But overall, there's more matchups, I think. Particularly while control is prevalent in the meta that I think Liliana is going to be better. And it's mostly kind of just control that Liliana is mostly strictly superior to Gatekeeper. If it wasn't for control, you know, you could even make the argument Gatekeeper's better. I'm not sure that it is, but as long as control's in the meta, I'd recommend Liliana if you can afford them, but totally not necessary. I think Gatekeeper, think of this exact same deck as like, think of this as basically the exact same thing as with Gatekeeper. Although you can't discount the fact that this does have 1 less black mana requirement to get full value at 3 mana, so I will say there's also that, but the deck is completely serviceable with Gatekeeper. I've done it, and anyway. Murder Strider, like the way we can play this again because we're not playing Luris. Yeah, destroy a Planeswalker or any creature outright, including Murktide Regent, which is running around. And you get a life-linking attacker as well. Very underrated. It's a little pricey, but now that we've got like March of Wretched Sorrow to supplement Fatal Push as a very good early removal spell, you know, and Collective Brutality to a lesser extent, but yeah, I feel like we've got enough ability to hold down the early game that we could start playing some, you know, a little bit more expensive cards later on, and just a really nice, flexible one. You know, like Murder Strider is definitely a welcome addition. I think this is one of the most underrated adventure cards out there, and I've been loving it almost every single time I've cast it. And I've already gone over March of Wretched Sorrow in detail. I guess I could just mention Hive briefly. You know, this is just mostly such a free roll. A lot of times, you know, it comes into play on tap, just like Den of the Bugbear, and later on, when it comes into play tapped later on in the game, a lot of times it doesn't hurt that bad later anyway. It's only in the early game where it hurts the most, and that's where it comes into play untapped. I mean, it would hurt the most, but thanks to its coming into play untapped in the first 2 lands, the time where having a land like this would hurt the most is oftentimes when it actually is at its strongest, because it's just mostly strictly superior to a swamp at that point. I already explained Relics is definitely the most powerful card. It helps with dealing with Tarmogoyf as well, which is something Neil Spellbomb doesn't, but again, also it gets around Leyline of Sanctity because it doesn't target to get rid of the graveyard. Fatal Push, enough said. We all know this card is the best removal spell black has. And the sideboard is pretty much the same as it was before. I used to have 2 Break the Ice, 1 Luris, but obviously Luris has been banned. I don't think this honestly makes as big of a difference as people say. Because I maybe it's just the decks I play, but I will say I think Merfolk, or Mono Blue in general, is a little bit better off because decks that have less reliable creature removal definitely are rejoicing. But like against red decks, for example, honestly, a lot of times Jegantha is a little bit more problematic than Luris anyway, because you can just use 1 removal spell on Luris, and you have to use like 2 burn spells on Jegantha, but that's here and there. Lithophone Blight, you know, mainly deals with Urza Saga, but also can deal with Tron lands. Can also just deal with random utility lands like Celestial Colonnade, something like that. If you have to remove like your Fatal Pushes or something like that. Break the Ice is almost exclusively for Tron decks, but you know, hey, we need all the help we can against Tron. And believe it or not, even with Field of Ruin and Lithophone Blight, I feel like with these alone, it's not kind of enough. But Break the Ice, particularly you kind of are going for overload with this when you are up against Tron. But yeah, paying 6 to wipe all their lands is crazy. Just remember that it also hits your blast zones, because I forgot that once and it was not a happy time. Necromentia, well, actually Ratchet Bomb, of course we all know that from the mono red deck, but deals with artifacts, enchantments, tokens, you get the drill. It's a very flexible card. I wouldn't leave home with that in a lot of decks. Very, very good all-purpose card. And Necromentia, I think this card is just really an underrated option for a mono black deck, because a lot of times the decks that we have the most difficult time dealing with are decks that play like a single card that just kind of gets us, like Scape Shift, or to a lesser extent Amulet Titan, and the fact that this can just pull those cards out preemptively is just pretty kind of a big deal. So I like it. It's not perfect, but like it shores up a lot of weaknesses that this deck would have without it. Trust me on that. Mostly you're not going to be bringing it in most of the time, but in like Amulet Titan and like Ad Nauseam against like Scape Shift. I'm probably missing something else, but against those kind of decks where if they top deck 1 card, you're toast. Like bam. Necromentia just makes such a huge difference. Name the card that basically would get you, and then, well, it ain't gonna get you anymore. But anyway, okay. So without further ado, the next deck on the list, Mono Blue Midrange. Yeah. So where's the Merfolk? What happened to the Merfolk? And also, what happened in the Mono Blue control deck? Well, where I'm on right now. Oh yeah, and in case you're wondering, these numbers here, this is like the best result that I've gotten with the deck so far. If it says T, that means I've trophied with it. But yeah, so the best result I've gotten so far with this deck is a 4-1. And this says 3-2, by the way, because of this, the Night Whispers version. Technically, I actually did get a 4-1 with, again, a version with Gatekeeper and Melikar. And I think with a Baron Moor, you know, the black cycling land that comes into play tapped, it's cycle for 1 black instead of Night's Whisper. That being said, I feel confident enough that this deck is better. Is better with Night's Whisper, that even though I got the better result, I mean, I still think, I think that was just kind of luck of the draw with matchups and other things. But either way, let's get back to Mono Blue. So Mono Blue. So yeah, what happened to Merfolk? What happened to Mono Blue control? The answer is they got fused together. And I don't know, out of all the decks, this is probably the deck that's most likely to end up getting shuffled around some more. This is the deck I'm least kind of confident in this being the final form. The rest I'm actually kind of surprisingly confident about, particularly basically all the red decks and the black deck. But yes, Mono Blue Midrange is basically a mashup between Merfolk and between Mono Blue control. And hey, the one league I played, and I think I've only played one league and I got this 4-1 in, but in that one league, it felt fantastic. I can't even remember what the one loss was, but it felt like I was going to trophy. And I think this deck definitely can trophy. I don't know though. Again, I haven't played it super extensively, but I loved it. I love the way it played. This is probably going to be one of my favorite decks. I hope. If it feels half as good in the next league I play with it as it did that one, I'm going to be a happy camper. I feel like it combines the best of what I loved about both that Mono Blue control deck and the Merfolk deck. That's why I call it Mono Blue Midrange, because it's not really Merfolk, which is honestly more of a tempo deck than aggro anyway. But it's definitely, yeah. I mean, it combines kind of like, yeah, it's not quite the tempo deck Merfolk is. It's not quite the control deck that Mono Blue Control is, but it's Mono Blue Midrange. I mean, this is kind of like Mono Blue Jund, actually, and I love it. Because if you think about it, like, Svalun kind of just turned into, hands down, just the most important card a lot of times in the Merfolk deck, like, not even close. And the thing that I kind of noticed is Svalun doesn't actually need any support to be good. It just doesn't. I think more blue decks should consider playing this card. It's nuts. It's 3 mana for a 3/4, and it draws a card whenever it attacks. And it doesn't need any Merfolk to do that. And yeah, it has a harder time gaining Indestructible. We got some Tide Shapers in the sideboard. I'll get to those in a bit, but you know, but at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have Indestructible, and it doesn't necessarily give ward to your creatures, but who cares? It's 3 mana for a 3/4, and whenever it attacks, you draw a card. I mean, first of all, can you imagine these stats? Back in the day, actually you can, because there was Chandra, a 3 mana for a 3/4 flying, which was actually considered a kind of nuts card back in the day for Mono Blue. That's like, I think that was from like Arabian Nights, but here's the thing about Chandra Feet. If I remember correctly, it dealt 1 damage to you in your upkeep, which is actually kind of huge, because when it comes to racing, that actually means that it's only a 2-point life swing instead of a 3-point life swing. And yeah, it had flying, but in my humble opinion, this card is so much better than Chandra Befreet because it draws a card, and who cares that it's legendary? They got to deal with this thing, or it's lights out for them. But the fact that it draws a card every time it attacks, that is so much better than flying, in my humble opinion. So yeah, Svalun. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It single-handedly became the single best Merfolk. This is actually the reason why in my Merfolk list I started to cut Lord of Atlantis. It's just that this card was kind of like the haymaker that Lord of Atlantis used to be, and much more. It has a huge butt, which is great for if it you know, like it survives a lightning bolt. It's also a great block. One of the things I also like about Svalun in this deck is that this can be a excellent blocker. I mean, it's obviously an excellent attacker if we can attack, but even if the board gets kind of stalled a little bit, like against goblins or something, sometimes like this just turns into a 3/4 wall, and sometimes that's just pretty good too. But anyway, yeah. Other than that, I mean, you know, Blast Zone is kind of like, again, one of the all stars. This is particularly in Mono Blue, where we don't necessarily have a lot of other good removal options. This is a surprisingly solid way to deal with like multiple Dragon Race channelers, or Death Shadows, or it doesn't even have to be multiple. If this just hits 1 Death Shadow, sometimes that's good enough, even if you have to pay 4 mana to do it. It's just super good, super flexible. Helps Mono Blue deal with all kinds of nonsense it couldn't deal with otherwise. And you know, and all while it can just tap for colorless mana until it's ready to work its magic. I mean, you know, I've already explained this in black, and we all know this from the mono red deck, so yeah, bam. One of Castle Vantress, I mean, you know, we could play more copies of this, but I do want to squeeze these other utility lands in. They're all pretty good in this deck. And I think we gotta have a healthy enough basic count in case we run into some crazy lunatic that's playing Blood Moon in the main deck. I mean, who would do that? You know, wink, wink, nod, nod. But you know, I'm obviously joking, because we're big. If we run into somebody playing one of our red decks, we definitely don't want to auto lose. But that just shows you how powerful Blood Moon is. That even against the monocolor decks, there's still a good chance it's gonna screw us out of the game. But yeah, well, you know, one of us is pretty solid. Minimizes the chances that we draw this without having an island. Even if we do, it's only gonna be 1 tap land, and you know, we generally can't really get much use out of more than one of these things anyway. So I like it. Very Conclave. This might be the most iffy card in the deck, but the amount of times that I've won by just pushing through flying damage with the fairies is, I mean, it's enough that, yeah, hands down, I've loved it. I don't know what else to say. I mean, it could be Mutavault, but this deck is pretty blue intensive, you know, counterspell and whatnot. I think Very Conclave is just very underrated mana land. You know, a 2/1 flying is nothing to scoff at. It's difficult to block. It can also, but it, you know, sometimes they can block it, but on the same token, sometimes you need to block their flyers, like Inkmoth Nexus or something against Hammer Time. Sometimes there's a difference in winning and losing is if you got a blocker for a flyer. I like it, and it's relatively free too. The honest truth is we don't really have that much to do on the first turn because we're kind of a Chalice deck. So it comes into play tap part just doesn't really matter too much. I just think you get a lot for this card, and it doesn't necessarily detract much from the deck. So I like it. Hollowed Storm Giants. On the same token, this might either look so much better than Fairy Conclave or so much worse, depending on how you look at it. It definitely has fewer downsides as a land because coming into play, you know, tapped is something that will happen less often with this card. But I find that both this and Fairy Conclave are actually both pretty good, even in the same deck. The reality is there are some games where we just can't really afford to tap out to use the ability. And then there's other decks where just like this becomes the win condition. This becomes like the thing that is almost impossible for them to deal with, and it just takes over the game by itself. Like this is a very kind of hit or miss card, but the fact that it has such a high potential to hit, despite the fact that it asks for very little in return, I have been solidly won over to this card. I was won over to this card even in Merfolk, but in the mono blue control deck in particular, I was very impressed with. So yeah, Hall of Storm Giants. I think this card is fantastic, and I would run it if you can. 8 basic islands. We obviously need islands to fight against Blood Moon, Minamo. Yeah, untapping Sphaloon. I mean, I don't know, enough said. I can also untap Vendilion Click, but that's kind of not as, it doesn't come up as often because, but it could. But, definitely untapping Sphaloon is kind of the main thing, because Sphaloon just makes such a fantastic both attacker and blocker. Minamo giving us the option to do both. Very solid. Don't want to play more than one, though, because obviously it does. The second one just kind of has to go to the graveyard. So, but just having one of these in here is kind of a no-brainer as long as you're playing Sphaloon, in my humble opinion. Oboro, this is probably the most cuttable. Yeah, I mean, I suppose one could make the argument that we could, drop Oboro, maybe even drop 2 more islands, go down to 6 islands, and put 4 Castle Lanterns. But I just feel like we're gonna have too many tap lands at this point. And late in the game, you never know. We might want to play Sphaloon and then bounce this to our hand, replay it, so that we effectively get a blue mana out of Blast Zone. Because, like, say we have like 4 lands and we haven't used a land drop this turn. We got Blast Zone, 2 islands, and Oboro. What we can do is we can maybe that's not the best example. Maybe we have 2 Blast Zones and 1 island and 1 Oboro, and it's turn 5. We haven't used a land drop yet. We've got 4 lands in play. So what we can do in that situation is we can actually play Sphaloon and hold up a blue source, I think, unless I'm mistaken. I think we can. So what we do is we tap. Okay, we need to have 5 lands. My bad. So we need to have 3 islands and 2 Blast Zones. Sorry if this analogy got off the rails, but yeah, like 2 islands, 1 Oboro, and 2 Blast Zones. And the way it would work is we tap the Oboro and 1 island and 1 Blast Zone to play the Sphaloon. So as long as we have no other, land drop this turn, I can see a possibility, because this does happen in Merfolk with like the Lords and stuff, is we're left with a Blast Zone and an untapped island and a tapped Oboro, but we can use the Oboro's ability with the Blast Zone to return it to our hand, and then replay the Oboro, and then boom, we can hold up Counterspell. So, it's something that won't necessarily happen a lot, but the fact that it can be used to filter a little bit for blue mana is kind of nice. And also if they got Liliana or something, and say we got a Counterspell in our hand, and I don't know, we're trying to play around. I don't know if anybody's combining Liliana with Scape Shift, but let's say they're playing a Liliana Scape Shift deck. Like, I don't know, they uptick with Lily. We've only got Counterspell in hand, but boom, we can return a Oboro to our hand, discard it, and then maybe we just need one more turn, just one more attack with Vendilion Click or something, so we can counter it or Scape Shift, attack with Vendilion Click, win. I mean, I know you have to, these scenarios seem kind of contrived, but everything seems contrived until it happens, if you know what I mean. And I've seen stuff like this happen, but either way, it's the new Kamigawa set. It's legendary land. I think this card has actually proven itself to be one of the top performing Kamigawa channel lands. I've only played 1 league, but I'm not sure if I used this more than once, but man, when I needed this card and when it bounced something, even if it was only 1 time that league, I gotta say, I'm pretty sure I would have lost if this card didn't have the bounce function. And I think I had his feeling too, so I think it only costed 3, which was also nice. But yeah, I mean, the fact that one of the lands in my hand actually got, oh, you know what it was? I think it was like an Archon of Cruelty or something. There was something that I needed to deal with it that turn, and it's like, and I was almost kind of ready to scoop, but I'm like, wait a minute, one of my lands actually bounces, boom, and then it's like, yeah, that's why this card is good. It's just a strictly superior island that can also deal with an Archon of Cruelty or something, and then you can counter it on the way down, hopefully, or if it's a Reanimator deck, maybe they can't even recast it. Yeah, anyway. Spreading Seas, great against Urza Saga. Also, we need some way to deal with utility lands from the opposing side. We don't really have any other way. Spreading Seas always draws a card, so it's never too bad. Sometimes it can color screw the opponent. Even if you're not playing Merfolk, I still think this is a pretty nice card. And a number of control decks have played it on and off throughout the years. I still like it. I would play it. Counterspell, enough said, we all know. Brazen Borrower, it's just a really good turn 2 play where we can bounce something, and then it also can be played as a meter. It plays into the mid-range strategy where we actually do put some pressure on the opponent, which I like. So we're not just a dirtily control deck, which I was actually doing okay with, like the dirtlier version of just like a straight control deck. But it's just it just becomes really frustrating. I mean, like when you win, it can be frustrating because you know like you're pissing the opponent off, which you might say like who cares, but like it just I don't know. It feels so like ugh, if I'm just dirtling around and not killing the opponent, and it's like this card just actually closes out the game instead of like maybe it's just me, but I feel like when you dirtle around and take a long time to kill the opponent, even when you got the game locked up, I just feel like it becomes a miserable experience for both players. There's a lot of players who probably just delay the misery features, but I don't know. I'm not one of them. So I just like the way this feeds into just being able to close the game out quickly. Also, being able to pressure planeswalkers means that it's not just about closing the game out quickly, which can never be, which is highly overrated in and of itself. I mean, highly underrated, I think, in and of itself. But the fact that planeswalkers are a real thing means that you can't also ever discount just having more ability to pressure them too. Force of negation. I mean, enough said. Yeah, it doesn't hit creatures, but like I've also got subtlety to kind of help shore up that, and dismember, of course. But yeah, just free deals with non-creature spells. It's just and even paying for 3 mana for it's not too bad a lot of times. Sphaelune, yeah, went in detail explaining this already. Kind of one of the linchpins of this deck. Also, kind of the bridge that ties together the combination that is Merfolk and Control, combining those 2 decks together to make one of the most pleasant experiences I've had playing a mono blue deck in a long time. Not that I've got anything against a more heavy Merfolk, a more heavy actual Merfolk kind of strategy, but like sorry to the Merfolk tribe if I kind of go blue mid range, but I'm still kind of representing as long as I got Sphaelune in the deck. Okay, can all the people who like Merfolk cut me some slack if I switch to something like this? I'm still playing a Merfolk. Okay, and probably I'll still play Tideshapers in the sideboard too, but I've still got Merfolk in the deck. Okay, can I still be considered a Merfolk player? I mean, I do. I still consider this an honorary Merfolk deck. But anyway, Vendilion Click. It's probably the card that's the most cuttable out of all of these. This could be Repeal, which feeds into the Chalice, which we'll get to in a second. But like, at the end of the day, I like Vendilion Click. I think this actually does a surprising it does a surprising amount for the deck. It's more pressure, which, like I said, you can never underestimate. You get to look at their hand, which is a bigger deal than it seems. You can do this at the end of the turn, get a peek at their hand. You got a 3/1, which you can attack or block with. It's gaining that information is surprisingly relevant in more situations you might think, particularly against combo decks where you got to know when you got to be holding up and when you can actually kind of tap out a little bit and get a little frisky. So it looks at their hand. It's great against decks like Amulet Titan sometimes, where like, especially the decks that go all in on the Cavern of Souls, where you can't really counter their stuff. To some extent, you have subtlety to kind of like buy you some time, but like, time alone is not necessarily going to stop them sometimes unless you can actually kill them quick. But Vendilion Click is cool because it kind of helps with both of those issues. It helps both deal with like an amulet, with like a Primeval Titan permanently, or not permanently, but like it sends it to the bottom. So yeah, they can refetch it with a Summoner's Pact, but like presumably it'll take some amount of time for them to find one of those to get it back. But yeah, it doesn't just come back. It's not guaranteed to just come back the next turn like with subtlety, but it's also a 3/1 beater in the air for 3 mana, so it actually does contribute to hopefully closing out the game before they redraw it, which you may not be able to counter. And another highly underrated thing is you can use this to discard cards in your hand, which in a deck that's playing Chalice and Dismember, which can either be irrelevant in some matchups, or if you lose too much life with Dismember, sometimes it makes itself irrelevant if you go down to 4 life later in the game. Chalice sometimes in some matchups doesn't do much. Sometimes Force of Negation doesn't do much. Just having Vendilion Click in the lineup where sometimes we can just pitch some of these cards that are otherwise lackluster. It can like a 3 mana 3/1 flash that basically draws a card, because if like a Force of Negation wasn't doing anything anyway, like just a 3/1 flying flash that draws a card basically, because again, if you pitch a card that doesn't do anything, yeah, like just it might as well just be draw a card. Actually surprisingly good, and obviously after sideboarding, that's kind of less of an issue, but just the ability to trade cards that are not particularly good in a matchup game 1. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Just Vendilion Click this is definitely, like I said, this is definitely the most cuttable card, but so far, I like what this brings to the table. I like that it does a lot of different things. We are a little bit heavy on the 3-drops, but we do have a lot of free spells too, so, and we got Chalice, of course, to punish the opposing deck for being super lean, so I like it. Just remember, I mean, we're mono blue, we don't really have any better creature removal options, so I don't know, enough said. And again, we can pitch extra copies or go too low on life, hopefully with Vendilion Click, so that's kind of nice. Or Cleek, I think, is how you say it, but Subtlety, this is actually the all-star of the deck. This is kind of what makes the deck tick. Just being able to play a 3/3 flying flash that essentially gains card advantage. Yeah, they get the other card back, but it delays them for a turn. They didn't draw another card. Or they might even put the card to the bottom. But at the end of the day, a 4-mana 3/3 flash that effectively puts you up a card and also tempos the opponent because they don't, even though they can replay it, they have to spend the mana to play it again. It's just a big deal. It's a big deal. This helps put on pressure while also taking pressure off of you, and also like it can also buy you the time you need against like Amulet Titan, for example. You could like even if you can't cast it for 4 mana, which is almost always, I almost always recommend holding on to this for 4 mana if you can, unless you absolutely must. But when you absolutely must cast this, it's invaluable being able to cast it. I mean, you absolutely must evoke it. It's just invaluable that you do have evoke as an option. For example, what if they get an early what if you have 2 blue mana, and you're on your turn 2, and you're up against Amulet, and they've got Cavernous Souls, and they have like double Amulet or something, and boom, they play Primeval Titan. You can't play your counterspell. You do have a Vendilion Click in your hand, but again, it's only turn 2, so you can't play your 3rd land yet. Normally you'd just be like, that would just be GG, but with Subtlety, it doesn't actually say counter, so you can actually evoke it, put the Primeval Titan on top of their library. Yeah, they'll draw it next turn, but then you draw a card, you can play your land, then you can play your Vendilion Clique on their draw step, and bam, you can hit that Amulet Titan that they just drew again off the Subtlety, but now it goes to the bottom, and hopefully they don't draw another one. Although, I forgot to factor in their Amulet Titan. Of course, we all know, of course, they're just going to rip another Primeval Titan off the top. But, okay, if you're playing against one of the rare unlucky Primeval Titan, Amulet Titan players, this will work. But, I guess bad example, because we all know that if you do this, if you play Vendilion Click and put a Primeval Titan to the bottom, they're just gonna rip another one, or a Summoner's Pact to get a Primeval Titan. Probably Primeval Titan itself, because you probably have Force Negation, so it'll feel extra crunchy or salty, whatever you call it. That they just happen to rip another Primeval Titan raw off the top instead of actually having to cast a spell that you could even counter with Force Negation. So, but against unlucky Amulet Titan players, that could work. And just the point is, just having that evoke option is invaluable. But I do recommend only evoking Subtlety when you absolutely need it. But I can't state enough just how valuable it is that this option is there when you do absolutely need it. And Chalice of the Void, I don't know what to say other than the fact that the biggest weakness that I think Mono Blue has is, other than cantrips, which that is another way you could take the deck, but I don't, I think we need a certain amount of threat density, and I like having the extra flexibility that having these other types of cards allows. But unless you're going to take this deck in the direction where you're going to play a bunch of the blue cantrips, blue doesn't really have a lot of great one-drop options. It doesn't have a lot of great one-drop creatures. It doesn't have a lot of great one-drop removal. I think Piracy Charm's a little underrated, but let's be honest here. Blue really, other than cantrips, blue doesn't really have many good one-mana options. So what I like about Chalice of the Void is, if you're not going the cantrip route, at least you can punish them for playing one-drops. And 0-drops in a world of Cascade and whatnot. So, and I think it's somewhat kind of the glue that holds the deck together. It was an all-star in the mono blue control deck, I'll tell you that for sure. So I liked it. Even when it did nothing, I felt like when it did nothing, the inherent strengths of the deck were kind of pulling it anyway, which I think is kind of one of the reasons why E-Tron works. Is I feel like E-Tron's the kind of deck where against the decks where Chalice of the Void doesn't do much, E-Tron kind of goes over the top anyway. And I don't know if you could call it going over the top, but I feel like this deck generally has a pretty good matchup against most of the decks where Chalice doesn't do that much anyway. Like, I feel like against E-Tron, we probably have a pretty good matchup, and which is nice to actually have a deck for a change that has a really good E-Tron matchup. I think, we'll have to probably test it more, but it just kind of feel like, of course, the ironic thing is both E-Tron and us play Chalice, and it's both our worst card in the matchup. But the point is both of us are trying to go over the top of each other. So both of our best draws kind of like I don't know how to, like, and if we actually do go slightly over the top of Etron, but maybe like Jund is another good example. Chalice of the Void isn't that great against Jund, but I feel like we kind of go over the top of Jund anyway. So what this helps shore up is against those decks that go under us, because I feel like we go over the top of a decent chunk of decks that go the grinding route. And so even if Chalice doesn't really do that much against them, it's still, I think the inherent strengths of the deck should hopefully help us out enough. Anyway, sideboard. Okay, Tideshaper. What's Tideshaper doing here? Very simple. Even though we've got Spreading Seas, you'd be surprised how many decks play Urza Saga. Quite a few. Urza Saga is an excellent card. Expect to see a lot of it until it's banned. I don't think it will be banned anytime soon. I don't know if it even will be banned, precisely because cards like Tideshaper hose it so hard. Just so hard. But yeah, and against Tron, like, we do need some extra non-basic land hate. Because, yeah, Spreading Seas does help, but we need kind of 8 to almost guarantee that we're actually going to have an answer. Because one of the problems with this deck is if they do just kind of start going nuts with Urza Saga, then we're kind of out of luck. The other nice thing about Tideshaper is in some matchups, like against Control and some low-to-the-ground aggro decks like Goblins that play like a bunch of 1/1s, sometimes decks that just spam the board with 1/1s are a problem. Like blocking a 1/1 with Dealing Click feels pretty awful. I mean, yeah, Subtlety and Phelan can kind of play blocking duty, but it's come on so late. Sometimes just having a 1-mana 2/2, or 2-mana 2/2 if you have to turn one of their lands into an island. But against some decks with islands, sometimes just having a 1-mana 2/2 that just is a fast beater, like against certain combo decks, or Control, actually it's pretty good against Control too, even if you're not even using the kicker. Like sometimes just having the option of a 1-mana 2/2, particularly against blue decks, is really nice, but it's mainly here for extra land hate. But the fact that it also can be an early 2/2 blocker against decks that spam 1/1s like Goblins or Elves, for example. Otherwise, they just overrun you with the little 1/1s. But also, the fact that it can be a good beater against Control, like Azorius Control, for example. This can just be like, I mean, imagine 2 Control decks facing off, but one deck has like Savannah lines in it, and the other one doesn't. Like, just having like a 1-mana 2-power creature sometimes it just puts you in the front foot, and it can make a big difference. And I've liked it the few times that it's come up. Not in this league, but I think back when I was playing just straight up mono blue Control, which some of the versions I think did have Phelan, but I think that was going more in the Shark Typhoon direction. But now I feel, but since I'm more in the mid-range territory instead of actual Control, I definitely like Phelan. I think more, and then Tideshaper also is nice because in some matchups, 2 Tideshapers will make Phelan indestructible, which actually did come up, I think, in this 4-1 league that I got with this. So Tideshaper does a surprising amount for the deck, and I also like that it does push us a little closer to actually being a true, at least honorary Merfolk deck. Relic of Progenitus, I mean, we need Graveyard Hate and, Relic, enough said. Ratchet Bomb, I think enough said. I've already gone over this in mono black deck. It's excellent. Mono blue similarly doesn't have that many great artifact or enchantment options otherwise, and Ratchet Bomb is a very underrated card that basically any other color can play. So bam. Deprive. This is probably one of the cards that is most subject to being changed, but we are not necessarily a true Control deck, so I don't necessarily feel too bad about returning an island to my hand. Against Control decks, particularly, having the ability to have extra counter spells basically is kind of a big deal. True, this could be Archmage Charm or even Cryptic Command or something, but I think Deprive's better. I mean, it also is good with Chalice because it's a 2-mana spell. I don't know what to say. I think this is a very underrated option, and being able to have extra copies of Counterspell. Obviously, Counterspell is way better in the main deck because you can't return a land to your hand. But, actually, there isn't too much about it. Unless the opponent puts a Spreading Seas on like a Fairy Conclave or something. Deprive is most of the time not going to be that much better. But, I mean, it's not going to be better. It's going to be just worse because it is going to set you back tempo-wise. But there's a decent chunk of decks, particularly combo, where I think that downside is going to be worth it. And then we just get to play some extra, albeit worse copies of Counterspell, but bam, in some decks, in some matchups, you really have to have that. So, alright, so that takes us to the elephant in the room, which is the red decks. And okay, this video is going to go on forever if I spend as much time going over each of these red variants in as much time as I went over the mono black and mono blue deck. But suffice it to say, I got a lot of different versions of different types of red archetypes. I think I'm gonna try to devote some amount of time to each one of these individual. So I'm not gonna go over. I'm gonna go over them by type. And the first one, as you can see, is Burn. Now I've got Jegantha Burn here, but I've also got Obosh Burn, which is actually a red-white variant, and I've got just straight red-white with no companion. So I've got Jegantha, Obosh, and companionless Burn. Obosh and companionless presently are splashing white. They may not always splash white, but I'll get to those in a second. Jegantha Burn. So I like having this in the pocket because it's the most budget-friendly version of any of my decks, I think. I'm not sure if Den of the Bugbear has spiraled out of control in price yet. If it has, don't worry about it. You can just swap this for mountains. It's no biggie. Or Horizon Lands if you've got them. There's other options for this card, is what I'm saying. But yeah, if you do own Den of the Bugbear though, this is one of the best advantages to not playing white. Is, oh my goodness, this card can hit like a truck. And while it doesn't always come up, and I will be honest, most of the time it doesn't, but when it does, it will single-handedly win some games for you that you otherwise wouldn't. Particularly sometimes when they have Chalice of the Void. I have won games, I think, with variations of burn decks, variants of burn decks, where they were on like Azorius Control and they played Chalice of the Void, and it shut off so many of my burn spells. But just hitting them a few times with Den of the Bugbear, bam, can finish them off with like a Skewer the Critics or a Rift Bolt here or there. That being said, the fact that it doesn't come up all the time means that you're not going to lose too many percentage points if these have sprawled out of control by the time I'm making this video in terms of price, and you can afford them. Don't worry about it. It's not strictly necessary, but this is the kind of card that you definitely want to pick up if you can. It's just fantastic, and I fell in love with it ever since I started playing it. Mountains, obviously, we need a healthy number of them. I think 12 is fine in order to support Lavadar, which we'll get to in a second. Which is one reason we don't see the Shinka or Sokan, whatever you call it. Don't worry, we'll see this card later on. It's been an all-star in other versions, but not in this one. We're playing Lava Dart. Remanap Ruins. This is very subject to just turning into more mountains, but I think it did come up in at least one of these games in this 3-2 league that I've had. So yeah. And Lava Dart, this is basically a Prowess Burn variant, and Lava Dart plus a couple of these Prowess creatures can just lead to really quick kills, so it's kind of nice to have. It's also just really great answer to Raga-Dragon, and it can still ding them for an extra 1 damage, which is surprisingly relevant sometimes later in the game. When you're just finishing them off. So yeah, it just deals with Raga-Dragon, and you still get an extra 1 damage effectively at the end of the game. Lava Spike, for burn, enough said. Lightning Bolt, I mean, enough said whether burn or not. Swiftspear, Soulscar. Soulscar might seem kind of iffy because you might be like, yeah, well, why not Goblin Guide or even Reinforced Ronin or something, but in this deck, I mean, being able to get quick kills, particularly with Lava Dart draws, is just kind of one of the draws to this deck. So I think Soulscar Mage is kind of where you want to be in this particular variant. I'm not playing Abbott. Kind of miss Abbott, but like the problem is Abbott. I mean, when you're playing Burn, I just feel like most of the time you're playing it on turn 2, hoping to squeeze more damage by turn 3. And like Abbott's one of those cards you really kind of want to wait until turn 3, and it's just more of a mid-range card than an actual burn card. So bam, no Abbott, which is fine. Flame Rift, I love that this was reprinted in Modern Horizons 2 because it's 2 mana for 4 damage, so we don't necessarily miss out on missing white because this is our pseudo Boros Charm. I mean, yes, Boros Charm doesn't deal damage to you, but having the splash for white does deal damage to you. So at the end of the day, just having access to a 4 damage burn spell that we don't have to splash another color for, make ourselves more vulnerable to Blood Moon. Have to take more damage even if we don't see Boros Charm, which there are, games where you don't see your Boros Charm, and, by that extension, there are games where we won't see Flame Rift, but in the games where we won't see Flame Rift, we won't take all that extra damage from our mana base that we would have if we were playing Boros Charm. We are playing Boros Charm in another version, by the way, so I'm nothing against Boros Charm per se, but I'm just saying Flame Rift brings some real advantages that Boros Charm doesn't, and it also works under Leyline. I don't know, it's 2 mana for 4 damage. I don't know what to say. It's 2 mana for 4 damage. Can also catch them by surprise because if they see that you're not splashing white, sometimes they think that you can't deal more than 3 damage in one burn spell, realistically, because nobody really plays Flame Javelin or any of the 3 options. But there is, in fact, a mono red burn spell that deals 4 damage, and it's back in Modern, and I do like it for that reason. Skull Crack deals 3 damage, which is a pretty decent rate. It's not as good as 4, but I think Flame Rift is one of the only 4 damage to the face burn spells that I'm aware of, at least for 2 mana. Sonic Burst doesn't count because you have to discard a card at random, and I don't even think it's modern legal. But yeah, Skullcrack, about as good of a rate as you can get for 2 mana, but we need some way to control life a little bit, and I think this is, I mean, we could play like, what's that card called? Something Vortex. We could play, trying to remember what this is called. Roiling Vortex. We could play Roiling Vortex, but like this deck is kind of going for maximum speed. That's kind of its angle, so I think Skullcrack is where we want to be. Plus, it feeds into the budget. I think Element a little better. I think Skullcraft is Skullcrack is a bit on the cheaper side, but I do think it's kind of better anyway because it feeds into the max speed element, whereas Roiling Vortex is more of a is a little more of a grind, a burn grind. It feeds into the quasi grindish kind of element that burn goes for sometimes. This one is kind of just aiming for pure speed. Light up the stage. It is ultimately 2 cards for 1 mana, and it is another way we can kind of cheese more than 3 damage from one spell we rub off the top. Because let's say we got a Lava Dart sitting around in the graveyard, and the opponent is at like 5 life. And they're like, yeah, great, because they got a Lava Dart in the graveyard. There's no red spells that deal more than 3 damage, so they're sitting pretty. But having Light Up the Stage is great because in addition to being able to rip Flame Rift to deal 5 damage by flashing back Lava Dart and playing the Flame Rift, they can't feel so comfortable at, say, 5 life because you could also rip a Light Up the Stage, Lava Dart their face, play it for 1 because you get Spectacle, and then you might be able to rip like 2 Lava Spikes or something. So that's an alternative way you can get more than 3 damage in a single turn, even if you rip 1 card off the top of your library. I do like it for that reason, and I just like it because it also helps you make land drops, and I don't know what else to say. Just I think in mono red this is very justifiable. Riftbolt is pretty good, although Riftbolt's a little bit of a non-bo with Light Up the Stage if it's revealed off Light Up the Stage. Although ironically, the suspend means that being able to play Light Up the Stage for 1 mana in an entire turn, if you play it the turn after Riftbolt came off suspend, makes it synergize well with Riftbolt. So it's a card that both synergizes well with Riftbolt, but also dis-synergizes with it. So I'm not entirely sure if I should be playing without Riftbolt, but Riftbolt's good enough, I think, and there's just not that many great burn spells. This could turn into Bone Crusher Giant, to be honest, but I think since this deck is kind of going for pure speed, I think we kind of just want maximum damage, like 3 damage for 1 mana. I think is kind of better overall than 2 mana for 2 damage plus a 4/3 creature on the back end that dings for 2 and it gets damaged. Skewer the Critics. This is the real deal in this deck. It's just another essentially Lightning Bolt, especially when you got Lava Dart to gain Spectacle if you need it. So yeah, enough said. Yeah, and I guess I won't spend as much time on the next versions, but this one, Shattering Spree. I mean, Smash and Smithereens is one of the main reasons to play. Yeah, I mean, it's like in Burn, this is basically the best artifact destruction spell you have. Pirate Spellbound for pro red creatures, and it also dings for 2, so it's a nice card. Best graveyard hate ever. It redraws, so you don't have to feel too guilty about playing it. Blood Sun. Why Blood Sun? Well, I mean, for the most part, we're not really. They're fetching a lot of basics anyway to play around our burn effects. What I like about Blood Sun is it completely shuts off their ability to get a Valakut win if they're playing something like Scapeshift or Amulet Titan. Yes, they can draw some way to remove this, but even though it doesn't color screw them, it turns off utility lands like Valakut, for example, or more importantly, Urza Saga, and by turn 3, it won't always necessarily prevent them from making 1 token, but it should almost always come online in time to prevent them from grabbing Shadow Spear, which is kind of the most important thing anyway. It deals with all future copies that they might play. It draws a card. I've been liking it. This is subject to change. This could easily be Blood Moon, but I actually think Blood Sun does a surprising amount of work for the deck. And the main thing I like is the fact that since it draws a card, like if you're trying to rip like a Lava Spike or something off the top, let's say you have 4 mana, they're at 3 life, you draw a card. If you draw Blood Moon and like you're dead the next turn, then it's like wah wah wah. But if you draw Blood Sun, it's like, well, I got 1 more chance to hit that Lava Spike. So if you got 4 mana, the turn before you're gonna die, you got to rip a Lava Spike type effect or Lightning Bolt or something, or you die. You rip Blood Sun, bam, you play it. You got 1 mana left. You rip Lava Spike and boom. Like so, just the redraw in Burn I think gives you extra mileage. Okay, let's go over the other 2 variants of Burn. real quick before I get to the other types of red decks that I'm on. We got Obosh Burn. I'm not going to go over this as much other than to say that Reinforced Ronin is the real deal, and you'll see that again in the other version. But I personally like this card better than Goblin Guide. I do. I have the worst luck ever with Goblin Guide, and the fact that this doesn't draw them cards is huge for me. But the main thing I like is it dodges sorcery speed removal. So, for example, Prismatic Ending, can't touch it. I like that, but actually the number one thing I like is the fact that you can cycle it. So if they've got like a stalled out board state or something, like you can hopefully just rip a burn spell off the top. A very underrated card. Yes, it doesn't have as much raw speed as Goblin Guide, but the main thing I like is the fact that it's cycling. There's just, I mean, how many times if you're playing Burn have you lost when you ripped a Goblin Guide off the top of the library when you needed a Lava Spike? Well, Reinforced Ronin gives you the redraw and, you know, one more chance to get there, which in Burn is a way bigger deal than it sounds like. If anybody's played Burn probably knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, Den of the Bug, I don't need to go over that again. Yeah, so I do have a light white splash here, but being able to play Vantage, Needle Verge, Pathway, and Sunbaked Canyon, I mean, all of these cards almost have no downside. We take no damage from them. This is a relatively light white splash, but I just feel like the white splash is kind of free. It's not as free in the other red mid-range decks, in my humble opinion, because cards like Blast Zone add a lot, particularly Blast Zone. Blast Zone is actually one of the main reasons why I'm less confident splashing another color. If I wasn't so hot on Blast Zone, though, one of the things I learned about playing this deck in particular is that the white splash is surprisingly free because these cards just really don't hurt you much at all. Yeah, there's really not much downside to them. There is a little bit after turn 3. This comes into play tap, but for the most part, it's going to come into play untapped. So it's almost no downside. This card is literally no downside for the I mean, at least unless you run out of basics or something. It only comes down as white if you absolutely need it, but it is nice to have as that option when you do need it. Sunbaked Canyon, this could honestly just be played as a redraw anyway. This could be Seal of Fire, and I think in previous versions I was playing Seal of Fire with Obosh to ding for 4, but I just like the way Firebolt, because I think I won one of these games in the last 3-2 league by just actually being able to deal just a ton of damage with just Firebolt alone after landing Obosh, which that isn't always going to get you there, but I just remember that I think the game kind of stalled out, and I had like a Firebolt in hand, one in the graveyard. I landed an Obosh, miraculously they didn't deal with it. Bam, I flashback Firebolt, brought them to 5, and then next turn I Firebolted flashback, brought them down from 5 to 1, and then from 1 to -3, and it's like, bam. Just, you know, one Firebolt in hand and one in the graveyard. I mean, very few other cards can do that. I don't know, I like the way Firebolt is actually a total of 4 damage, even without Obosh's help. It is potentially more damage if you do land Obosh late in the game, and you may have some sitting in the graveyard, but either way. Yeah, I think it's an underrated card in Burn. At the end of the day, if we're not playing white and we're not playing 2-drops, we kind of like don't necessarily have access to cream of the crop burn spells anyway. So I actually think Firebolt is very underrated, at least in this deck, and I've liked it. Lava Spike, Lightning Bolt, enough said. Raga-Dragon, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't have cycling, but Raga-Dragon is very sweet if you can afford it, particularly in this deck because you know, actually, I think GG for Goblin Guide recently had a video, which I think he was playing a deck similar to a previous, you know, mono red instead of, you know, red white with a lightweight splash basically for the sideboard. Instead of this version, it was like I think the previous mono red kind of takes something similar to that at least, and you know, and I agree with him. The main reason why Raga-Dragon, I mean, yeah, that was my thought actually. He beat me to the punch. I think I was dabbling in a little bit before actually posting an analysis, but yeah, Raga-Dragon is very sweet in this deck because it does allow us to skip from 1 to 3, and in a deck that does not have 2-drops, it's kind of a big deal. You don't strictly need it. You can definitely just replace it with the Goblin Guide if you can't afford it, but in fact, I got my budget options here, and I think I forgot to add Goblin Guide as a option for the at least for the Burn deck. Let's get our Goblin Guide in here. There we go. Yeah, so I have a little list of like potential budget replacement cards here, and Goblin Guide is definitely a good. It could also just be a Reinforced Ronin too. Oh, actually, I've already got Reinforced Runner. So yeah, this could just be Goblin Guide. Very easy peasy, lemon squeezy. There's a good argument to be made that Goblin Guide is better anyway in this deck, but I like Raga-Dragon. It has felt like it just single-handedly won me some games. Bone Crusher, already discussed that in previous decks. Well, maybe not though. Actually, I don't think so. I don't think I've actually have discussed it. So my bad. I actually really think Bone Crusher is kind of an underrated card in burn decks. It's not in the hyper, basically almost speed-centric focused version of the Jegantha Burn-Prowess Burn list, but in a deck that's even marginally a little more on the grindy side, and definitely a deck playing Firebolt, I think leans a little bit more in the grindy direction than the Flame Rift version. I'll say that much. But yeah, it's 2 mana for 2 damage. It can be good for dealing with creatures. You know, sometimes you got to deal with Stoneforge Mystic, obviously, so doing for Batterskull. You know, it can set up for killing pro-red creatures, you know, because of the damage prevention. We all know like that with Skullcrack. But at the end of the day, it can just go 2 damage to their face, if nothing else, even if there's no creature that you have to kill. And sometimes killing a creature is worth it, especially if you can push through 2 damage through a creature, and so it won't die. But anyway, worst case scenario, most of the time basically just go face for 2, and then if you play it for 3 the following turn as a 4/3, I mean, there's going to be a lot of matchups and a lot of board states and a lot of games where they got to deal with the 4/3, and then they took 4 damage. They went down a removal spell in their hand. They had to spend mana, and you dealt 4 damage. Now, granted, you had to pay a total of 5 mana to get that 4 damage, but I mean, hey, you know, if the game goes a little bit longer, dealing 4 damage to them, even for 5 mana, and you know, taxing a removal spell in their hand, that can definitely be worthwhile. But yeah, I mean, it's not perfect by any means, but it's better than it looks like in a burn deck. Just it is burn, but it's also a creature, and it's a creature that burns them if they kill it. It's not bad at all on burn, in my humble opinion, and I've definitely liked it when I've drawn it. And up the stage, I like it for the same reason as Jegantha Burn. It's a little less reliable here, where we've got more 3-drops, but still very good. Riftbolt, yeah, I mean, same thing. 1 mana 3 damage, what else to say. Skewer the Critics, 1 mana 3 damage, you know the drill. Now, Seasoned Pyromancer, this is also one of the cards that's most subject to change, but this just isn't really. This actually used to be Flame Break, which actually maybe I'll put this in my budget list too here. Yeah, this actually used to be Flame Break, but the reality is I almost never really played Flame Break, and once I got excited because I thought I was going to deal with a Dragon Rage Channeler and deal 3 damage to both of us, which you don't really care about dealing damage to yourself too much, so I was I was caught on Flame Break at first because I'm like, yeah, this is a pretty good option for dealing for you know replacing Searing Blaze in an Obosh build. You have to spend more mana, but it can also wipe more than 1 creature. The fact though that this doesn't hit flying creatures, unfortunately, has become a bigger deal than before. I mean, so many Ornithopters running around, so many Dragon Race Channelers. It's not the end of the world, and it still could be a good card, and I am definitely going to put this in my budget options, my list of good budget options. This is definitely a good budget replacement for, and you know what, actually Fable could be a good, it's neither here nor there, but yeah, I'll get to this. There's a version where we're definitely playing this card, but it's because this actually could be a good budget replacement for Seasoned Pyromancer, because if you think about it, just like the way Seasoned Pyromancer for 3 mana, it gives you a 2/2 body, it filters 2 cards, and it potentially gives you, it either draws you 2 cards, or it filters 2 cards and gives you another body. And so if you think about it, this also, you know, gives you a body, filters 2 cards, and potentially gives you another body. I mean, it does give you another body, I mean, eventually. But one of the biggest differences, though, is it doesn't give you the tokens out of the graveyard, and that, yeah, and it doesn't give you that all immediately. You have to wait like 3 turns, but like it's closer to actually giving you the kind of value that Seasoned Pyromancer gives than you might think. We'll get to where I think the home for that is in a second, though. But generically speaking, it is kind of a half decent answer to a budget option to Seasoned Pyromancer, actually, and I think one of my patrons, you know, shout out to one of my patrons. Let me make sure I get them correct. Shout out to Magnus, one of my patrons who watches. I think definitely. Oh wait a minute, no, sorry, that's it was. I think it was, okay, here it is. Yuha, Landinoja, shout outs to Yuha, Juha, because I do like Fable in a different version, together with Season Pyromancer, but it is actually also a surprisingly underrated, um, budget replacement to. Oh, and let's get back to the deck. I was actually looking at my Patron manager for a second. Yeah, and thanks for the patrons that are sticking with me, even though I've gone through a content drought, but really appreciate it. Definitely, thank you so much. But yeah, so let's see here. Oh, wait a minute. We'll get to this in a second. Yeah, so Obosh Burn, yeah. Yeah, Season Pyromancer is still surprisingly good. I don't know what else to say. I mean, it has the redraw, like I've been talking about. You can't underrate the advantage of having redraws. Buying turns, I mean, this potentially can at least buy us one turn from just having a 2/2 body itself. But if we have to ditch, like some spare Raga-Vans or reinforced runs in our hand, hopefully we're not discarding actual burn spells. But either way, there'll be some matchups where if we buy ourselves some extra times by flooding the board with tokens and the Season Pyromancer, maybe we buy ourselves enough turns to where we can rip the burn spells we need to win. I think it's an improvement over Flame Break, to be honest. But Flame Break is actually a very serviceable card you can play this slot too. And I did play it before. I just felt like Season Pyromancer just was definitely kind of marginally better. Yeah, and so Sideboard Relic, enough said. We already went over that for the other decks. Blood Sun, same thing as the Jegantha version. Splashing Path and March. Both of these are pretty good. There's definitely other options. I mean, I could play Silence. So White does actually open up a lot of sideboard options, but good old removal. I mean, both of these cards deal with opposing pro red creatures, and since I can't really play pro red creatures myself, at least, and fully get full value out of Obosh, I do think that Path and Otherworldly Light are kind of good. Instead of that, because at least we have their opposing pro red creatures pretty much under control with 8 anti pro red effects, even if we don't necessarily have that ourselves. And we do grind pretty decently well. I mean, I don't know how the heads up burn matchup really goes. Although Season Pyromancer could be good, it could also be too slow. But anyway, I think it generally is good, because I think most of the burn heads up matchups that I've gone to a lot of times come down to who has better creatures, and I think Season Pyromancer is definitely a better creature. You don't see this much in Burn, but I think this could be kind of a mirror breaker in Burn. While most Season Pyromancer decks don't particularly have good Burn matchups in my experience, and that includes our Blood Moon kind of centered mid-rangey red decks. But I do think that sticking Season Pyromancer in a Burn deck is a little bit different, because we still have a high density of Burn spells, and we just end up with a source of good repeatable damage spread over multiple bodies, so they really don't want to be spending like multiple lightning bolts on each, on the Season Pyromancer and use of the tokens. So we have a good potential source of recurring damage, not easy for them to deal with, and potentially draws us into more burn spells. And I don't know what to say, just my hope is that Season Pyromancer gives us an edge against a lot of other burn matchups, so we don't necessarily need to lean on having a powerful, like Core Firewalker type card. And then at least we should have answers to theirs covered. I do like Path, because it obviously does help us deal with cards like Murktide Regent, which otherwise could be kind of a problem, so it is kind of nice to have. And instead of that, I mean, I wouldn't honestly not splash White just for Path. I think some people would. I'm not one of them. But what I really like is March of Otherworldly Light, because, I mean, in addition to dealing with Death Shadow, dealing with any artifact or enchantment, as long as you have mana, what is really cool about this card is it deals with Urza Saga for 1 mana. And if you play this in response to Urza Saga getting a counter, its first counter, they can't even tap it for mana the turn it comes into play. And you don't have to pitch a card too, because it's 0, so you can just pay 1 white and exile an enchantment with mana cost 0, which Urza Saga is. So bam, this card's ability to just trash Urza Saga for 1 mana while also being flexible and being able to hit other things. That's what I love. This card is what makes me want to splash White. I don't honestly need to. This deck could easily be mono-reditized, if that is such a word. But I also just like the way this card is generally kind of a better, more flexible answer to like Chalice of the Void. Otherwise, I'd have to play something like either Shattering Spree, which doesn't conflict with Obosh, but also isn't a particularly good burn option. More like I could play Pillage, but it's 3 mana, and I just like March of Otherworldly Light in burn, because this can also clear away creatures, which can clearing away creatures has a higher ability to translate directly into damage by clearing the way for a Reinforced Ronin or a Raga-Dragon, or just a Seasoned Pyromancer Tribute or something. Than pillaging a land directly translated into damage. It could, but in a very attenuated way, whereas this can translate into a very direct and a very immediate way to push more damage at the creature. So even though creature removal is not burn, and it's incorrect to conflate the two in a true sense, I do think that this is a little bit closer to what burn wants in being able to potentially translate into immediate damage. Whereas pillage is just so far off the scale from being able to translate into direct damage. More than the most extremely attenuated of kind of situations that, yeah, I like March, and that alone, yeah, is I think worth it for white. So that is Obosh Burn. I get to red, white, burn. I definitely want to speed it up a little bit because, yeah, I've been spending more time on each of these than I thought, but hope you're all enjoying it. Man, I do like this. I do like this deck, and as you can see, I did trophy with this. Now, when I say PT here, that means that I trophied with a prior version of the deck. Just because I trophy with a prior version and I didn't trophy with the most recent version, that doesn't automatically mean I'm just gonna switch back to the previous version. I still think it's possible to make improvements. I mean, we did go 4-1 for what it's worth with the last outing we had, as you can all see. So yeah, red, white, burn. I don't know what else to say. Just I'm not gonna spend too much time on this other than that. The mana might seem a little wonky. I've never found myself needing more than 2. Basics for the most part. Although when it does come up, it kind of sucks. But like, I mean, let's put it this way: there is clear disadvantage to this, and this is one of the reasons why I like monocolor in general. But if I'm going to be playing multicolor, I mean, I feel like it's generally just better to just stomach this and just admit that having few basics is something you'll have to deal with. Oh, and we're going to get to a deck of mine. I guess little preview. Ooh, did I just show a deck with Field of Ruin, Ghost Quarter, and Cleansing Wildfire? Oh, we'll get to that later. But yeah, burn, red, white, burn, yeah. See, in a way that double dragon, maybe I should call it double dragon wildfire. That deck is kind of designed to punish mana bases like this. Thankfully, there are not many decks that are built like that deck that I built. Thankfully so. So hopefully, unless somebody's running against some deck that I built, some deck similar to that one I built, you know, I think this has been a fine mana base. It has, for the most part, done what I wanted to do. I haven't really needed more than 2 fetches. I used to actually have the triomes and stuff, and man, I don't have the person in front of me who suggested March of Otherworldly Light. I'm not sure if it was Insert S or if it was man, my bad. Whoever you are, you know, you can drop it in the comments, and I'm like, yeah, sorry, I forgot your handle who suggested March of Otherworld. But thank you so much to you know, one of my followers on Twitter who suggested March of Otherworldly Light, which actually also applies for the Obosh version. But like, I do think this card is better. This card is definitely better than Prismatic Ending, which sucks because I bought my Prismatic Endings already. Hopefully they don't. I think Prismatic Ending is one of those cards that actually could easily go up in value. So probably not a bad purchase at all anyway. Even though I may not necessarily be playing those much, but again, number one reason why this is better than Prismatic Ending and just really great overall in this deck is it just trashes Owners of Saga real hard, which can become a problem for us, particularly because it grabs that Shadow Spear. And the fact that it also just, you know, I mean, yeah, you have to spend a little more mana, but you can just remove almost anything if you have enough mana for it. It's super flexible, it trashes Owners of Saga really hard. I don't know what to say, this card is awesome. And it's one of the reasons to splash white, and, well, we are playing it. You know, Deflecting Palm, this is one of the main draws to splashing white. You know, I'm just gonna say it. We couldn't play it in the Obosh Burn list. If we could, I mean, we could, but like, I just save it for this deck if I'm really in the mood to play Deflecting Palm, which is a lot, and I'm probably gonna be playing this version more than the Obosh version, I would imagine. Although I think Obosh is underrated, and I want to play that deck more too. There's a lot of decks that are a lot of fun. Time is limited. You can't play them all the time, but like, man, Deflecting Palm though. This is one of the best advantages if we're not worried at all about having a companion to accommodate, because man, like, there's just a lot of matchups like you know, Infect, where I don't know, Infect is usually not a bad matchup. It's actually one of Burn's best matchups, but like sometimes it's not a good matchup if they drop if they drop Phyrexian Crusader, I'll tell you that much. The 3-mana 2/2 double strike, not double strike, 3/3 2/2 pro red, pro white. You know, infect creature, bam. That has protection from this deck, but deflecting palm doesn't actually target. So like, actually, if they're playing Golgari Infect, which is the most popular form of Infect nowadays, yeah, deflecting palm can be great against there. It's great against Amulet Titan, against Hasty Primeval Titans. It's great against Emrakul. Just remember to tap the lands in response to the trigger. Otherwise, you're going to be not a happy camper in response to the annihilated trigger. But if you tap the lands in response, then you can float the mana and then play it after it tapped an attack, so they can't get out of it. It's great against Charbelcher, so whenever, it's basically our only out against Charbelcher, but it is so cool when we swing the Charbelcher back at them and they don't have force or pact negation. But yeah, and one of the main things I like about this deck is, honestly, one of the main reasons I think to play white at all is the pro red creatures. I mean, because there's so many red decks running around, so many Raga-Vans, so many Dragon-Range Channelers. There's a decent amount of actual other burn decks running around in the meta. Core Firewalker, obviously a house against burn, but it's actually surprisingly serviceable against a lot of decks that play red, including isn't Murktide, because red is by far the color. It's basically their only removal color, and they can get around with it with dress down, but like, you know. But at the end of the day, if this card swings a few times, if this card gets 4-6 damage or something before they deal with it, man, you got your value out of it. Especially if it gains some life along the way too, even before they deal with it. And that's not even to say of like some of the red matchups where they don't really have a good answer, at least not in their hand, or it takes them a while. You know, sometimes you just dealt so much damage and gained so much life, which gaining life is never irrelevant, even actually in non-burn mirror matches, because, you know, a lot of times extra life translates into living, you know, one or more extra turns, and then that's potentially more burn spells you can rip off the top. It's never a bad card. I have to apologize, because actually I used to think that this was like a really dumb card for red decks to play, because it felt like red decks were all just cannibalizing each other's win percentage instead of focusing on attacking the meta. As a whole, the kind of prisoner paradox. Well, maybe I shouldn't say I apologize, because there have been some metas where I feel like burn was not significantly played enough in the meta to justify burn players playing Core Firewalker on the sideboard just to hate on each other, and yet they did anyway, which unfortunately just pushed burn's meta, you know, even further down, because the burn decks were cannibalizing each other again, rather than focusing on the rest of the meta and trashing them, and just having a gentleman's agreement where it's like, well, we face each other, but at least neither of us have to deal with this nonsense card, and then we're both better prepared to attack the rest of the meta, which would have actually, I think, in some metas pushed up the overall burn win rate. But that being said, we live in a different time period, so maybe it's not quite correct to say I apologize for having a mistaken opinion of Core Firewalker, because it definitely was periods in the past where that analysis was correct, where Core Firewalker is a massive prisoner's dilemma, where I don't think burn players really should have been playing it. But somebody did a long time ago, and everybody just had this in their sideboard because somebody else did. But that's not the case. If that was the case before, in some metas at least, it is definitely not the case now. As of right now, so many freaking Raga-Vans, so much red in general, just all over the format. I don't know what to say. Just this card's a powerhouse, and, you know, against red, boom, and Sanctifier on back. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a rest in peace on a body in most matchups. Certainly most matchups where you want graveyard hate. So it's just kind of nice to have this effect, and it's one of the major draws to playing white, in burn. And shout out to GG for Goblin Guy here on YouTube. If you like burn content, actually, he plays burn more consistently than I do. I'm a little bit more of a bread and butter kind of red mid range player, at least at the moment. I actually used to play burn as my main mono red deck, but I kind of gravitated more mid rangey. But I'm still, just gonna try to squeeze some burn in there. As you can see, I'm trying to give burn some love in this deck. But Sanctifier and back, man, yeah, shout out to GG for Goblin Guide, because I watched one of his videos, I think, on sideboard update or something for his burn deck, and I agree with his analysis spot on. Actually, if I had to choose between Core Firewalker and Sanctifier, I think I agree with him. I would choose Sanctifier. I mean, it's a tough call though, because the life gain is certainly nice, even matchups nowadays outside of burn. But I mean, Sanctifier just does so much, and it also sometimes just makes Dragon-Range Chandler just not able to get Delirium, so it grounds it kind of as a 1/1, so it almost is like a one-sided humility there. I mean, what else is what does it not do? I mean, it deals with opposing Archon of cruelties that Reanimator decks should have put in their graveyard. It basically just hoses Dredge. I mean, in addition to being a 2/2 body.
I don't know what else to say. Just it does a lot. Oh, it hoses Death Shadow. You can block Death Shadow for days, attack through it if you need to get damage for the win. For the most part, they're gonna have a tough time dealing with it. I mean, it's oh, it can block Germ tokens against Batter Skull. Don't forget about that. It doesn't always come up, and there won't always be a lot of decks where it's justifiable to bring this in. I certainly wouldn't bring this in just to block a Batter Skull token, but do not forget that those Germ tokens that those living weapons create are technically black. So yeah, they won't gain the life either if you block the Germ token that Batter Skull's attached to. It won't work if Batter Skull's attached to something other than Germ token, but it says 90% of the time, if Batter Skull's attacking, it's going to be attacking with the Germ token. Yeah, Sanctifier, man, I don't know what to say. I agree with GD for Goblin Guy. This card is the real deal, and I would probably never leave home without 4 of these in my sideboard if I'm playing the White Splash in Burn, and if I'm not playing Obosh, which this would conflict with. But if I'm not playing Obosh, which I'm not in this version, yeah, this card's the real deal. And it's a great card to have in your sideboard if you have white, so there you go. That's why it's there. The rest of the deck here, okay? I mean, most of this is pretty standard stuff. I'm playing 4 copies of Lightning Helix, because, I mean, why not? If I'm playing white, I mean, this card helps regain some life loss from taking extra damage from my mana base. And I do like having all 4 Sacred Foundries again. Yeah, I know, but don't judge. I mean, at the end of the day, I never run out of lands to potentially fetch. I need to have like 18 white sources when I've got 8 freaking double white cards. Honestly, sometimes I even get white screwed with just the 2 basic mountains, but it rarely happens because I do have fairly consistent access to double white on turn 2. So yeah, Sacred Foundry, just having extra copies of these. But if I can't take the extra life, you just play it tapped. I like it. I don't know what else to say. These could be extra fetches, but I don't know. Extra fetches are tricky because, I mean, if I play I can't play 2 Sacred Foundries and 4 mountains, but I feel like I also can't play 2 Sacred Foundries and 2 more fetches because then I just run out of fetchable lands way too quickly. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. 2 is also, I think, pretty sufficient to play Searing Blaze. Most of the time you play Searing Blaze as sorcery anyway, but you still have these 2 which you can save around if you really need this for an instant. I've found it to be surprisingly serviceable to just have 2. But yeah, Lightning Helix, I mean, if I'm playing white, might as well get rewarded for it. And I mean, yeah, it's a little pricey for 2 mana instead of 1, but gaining the 3 life, it really matters when you race with Burn. Gaining that extra life could easily translate into another turn. Boros Charm, obviously, probably the #1 reason, at least the main deck reason, to play white. It is in fact the real deal. If this was the only card, though, I would not splash this. I would not splash white just for this card anymore. Not with Flame Rift. I think if we were only thinking main deck, I don't think Lightning Helix and Boros Charm would be worth it. But it really is the sideboard, in my humble opinion, that you really unlock with white. And I know I'm not playing Riftbolt or Skewer the Critics, and I know that seems like it must be a mistake, but like in this deck. Well, in this deck, I can't really play, and everybody knows Eidolon. This card's nuts and almost always deals some damage even when they have to remove it. But yeah, like I can't really play Riftbolt because of Roiling Vortex, which I have in the main. I mean, I could, but once I land Roiling Vortex, having to tap 3 for Riftbolt kind of sucks, or taking 5 damage if I want to suspend it. Yuck. It happened before where I had Riftbolt and Roiling Vortex in the deck together. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel like they were. It felt like they were very non-bowing together. So yeah, so that explains Riftbolt. Now Skewer, I might have a little more explaining to do. And I'll just say quickly, Roiling Vortex in this kind of deck is great. I mean, it prevents life gain, and and also like if they cascade or something, boom, 5 damage. Anyway, yeah, I don't know what else to say. This deck is not necessarily going for pure speed, but this deck, I mean, this is a very, very flexible, nice card to have. And if you're not all in on speed like the Jegantha version, this card offers a lot. It offers a lot in the punishing for free spells. It offers a lot for the preventing life gain. It offers a lot for the, non-creature source of recurring damage. So anyway, but yeah, maybe I have a little more explaining to do for no Skewer the Critics. But okay, hear me out. Here's my #1 reason with that. Think about it. I got what is it? 20 cards. Technically 5 slots of 4-ofs here. For 2 mana spells, and I think Lightning Helix is kind of just better than Riftbolt in this deck, and aside from Skewer the Critics, aside from the Roiling Vortex, I mean, yeah, again, I just really like being rewarded for white. The gaining the 3 life is huge, and so and Skewer the Critics is just not gonna always be able to be cast out for 1 mana, and like I'm not playing Seal Fire, and without Riftbolt to also help set up Skewer the Critics. And without Goblin Guide too, because this card returns to my hand, so I kind of have to at least, Skewer only really comes on when I've got enough mana to both attack and through. I don't know what else to say. This deck doesn't have a lot of, if the deck isn't set up to really get to Spectacle relatively easily, which my other decks have a much easier time getting Spectacle, I just feel like Skewer the Critics, it can easily be a 3-mana burn spell, and it's just not really that great at that. And we've got 5 2-mana burn spells in S4 ofs, 5 of them. And I feel like that kind of prices us into having, in order to make sure our curve works, so kind of having 5 1-drops. And I kind of like all of these 1-drops to be playable on turn 1, which Skewer the Critics is in. And I know this is, and we've already gone over Reinforced Ronin and Raga-Dragon, so I'm not going to go over them again, but this takes us to probably the most questionable card in the list, which is Played with Fire. But I actually really like this, and hear me out, okay? Now, I know this isn't Firebolt like it was in Obosh, which maybe you'd be expecting me to be playing if I'm not playing something like Skewer the Critics, but hear me out here. I like Play with Fire, even in this deck over Firebolt. This deck plays so many 2-drops. The curve is kind of the real deal. This card will either deal with a creature that you have to deal with, like a Raga-Dragon, like a Stoneforge Mystic, or maybe there's probably a lot of other cards that I'm not thinking off the top of my head, but believe me, they come up all the time, and excuse me for not remembering off the top of my head. I'm doing this a little bit late, actually. But this will either deal with some creature that you have to deal with at instant speed, or if it goes face instead of going to such a creature, in which case, by the way, if you don't want one of those creatures, you're still getting a better rate at 1 mana than you would for any 2-mana burn spell, or having to set up some kind of bizarre skewer turn to try to skewer the thing. So Play with Fire will be pretty primo if you're dealing with a must-deal-with creature for 1 mana, so no complaints there if that happens. 1 or 2 things are going to happen when you play with Fire. Like I said, either you're going to get primo advantage by having a 1-mana instant deal with threat, which it really doesn't get much better than that for the most part, or it's going to go face. And going face is where normally you'd have the biggest issue with having a 2-damage burn spell instead of a 3-damage burn spell. But the Scry actually really helps. It helps make sure that you top deck the burn spells when you need it. It helps make sure that you top deck the lands where you need to curve out to play, multiple stuff, like or to play either your 2-drop if you don't have a second land, or to get like a 3rd land so you can play like a 2-drop and a 1-drop. But either way, like it helps set up your draws in such a way where a deck like this that has a lot of 2-drops can be a little clunky, because it's definitely one of my highest curve. Ironically, maybe even higher than the Obosh version, because those 3-drop burn spells, a lot of them basically have alternate casting costs. But yeah. Anyway, point is just Play with Fire. The fact that it can scry when it goes face, it's just really good. And I could definitely see myself liking Firebolt better, but one of the big downsides to Firebolt in this deck is that Sanctifier and Vec eats it up if it comes out of the sideboard, which it happens enough that I can definitely see the merit to just not bothering with Firebolt, because I might as well just play a card that's better when I can't flash it back if it's just gonna get eaten by Sanctifier anyway. So yeah, that's Red White Burn. This is obviously a very different, you could say MHayashi-ish kind of approach, but I have trophied with versions that are very similar, that are either playing Riftbolt or something, or but like I think this actually was one of the decks that I may have one of the highest win percent. I don't think I've ever got less than a 4-1. I don't think so. Maybe I'm forgetting something, but like I definitely got I have a very good win percentage with this deck. I'll tell you that much. And that's not a surprise, I think, to anybody, because Burn has been a very solid choice in a lot of meta, but I've particularly liked these sideboard slots, and I've actually liked this main deck, even though it looks wonky as heck. It ain't an MHayashi deck unless I wonk all over it, right? But anyway, okay. Let's get to the rest of the red decks. Let's get to the... Okay, before we get to the Obosh decks, actually, let's just get to this. Wildfire. This double dragon deck is what I call it. Yes, I hope I don't get something from Technos Japan. I don't think Technos actually owns the rights to double dragons anymore. It might be Atari or something, which maybe is even worse. But and not that there's anything wrong with Technos, other than that they made some questionable business decisions, which I think led to their bankruptcy, if I'm not mistaken. But But as far as making games go, other than outsourcing Double Dragon 3 in the arcades, which wasn't necessarily, as far as making games go, again, I guess that falls into more of a business decision to outsource making Double Dragon 3. But when it came to actually making games, I don't think you could say too much bad about Technos. But that's neither here nor there. I mean, we're not talking about Technos. We're talking about Double Dragon the deck, not Double Dragon the video game. And I know this seems cheesy. I mean, like, did I really make a deck just to call it Double Dragon? Well, no, not really. I just kind of wanted to try out Sushi the Blazing Sky. Shout out to Marin MTG, by the way. Technically, I'm not sure who recorded which video first. I do have, I mean, she probably recorded hers before my most recent one. I have a previous video I was trying to record without Sushi, but I don't know if it worked that well. I can't remember. I definitely scrapped it, whether it worked decent or not. Either way, shout out to Marin. She beat me to the punch as far as uploading a video, trying out Sushi. So check her out if you want. She's got a deck called Sushi Moon, I think. I mean, she's got a video called Sushi Moon or something like that. I can't remember how well she did or not, but either way, I think Sushi is actually better than it seems. Either way, I wanted to try out Sushi, and I also wanted to try a budget deck. And one of the things about this deck is that like it kind of started conceptually as this idea like, well, I kind of want to have some kind of budget option for like a mid-rangey type deck. Problem is that I can't play Blood Moon on turn 2, so like I can't keep my opponent off Tron on the draw. I can't deal with Urza Saga on the draw without them at least getting a token, which kind of sucks. And then I'm like, well, Cleansing Wildfire kind of shores up that problem. And one of the things I started noticing actually when I had Cleansing Wildfire, which I think started off in the sideboard, is that sometimes if I drew multiple of these, they just run out of basics. And that got me thinking, where I'm like, a lot of decks in Modern, I mean, wink wink, cough cough, wink wink, whatever. A lot of decks in Modern just don't play a lot of basics, right? I mean, it's true. I mean, yeah, sure, some do. Maybe even a decent number do. But a surprisingly decent number actually don't really play more than 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 basics max. I mean, a lot of decks don't play that many basics. Easily, a lot of decks. I mean, Death Shadow, I think, traditionally just plays 1 Swamp. I mean, I've been told by somebody who actually kind of tried experimenting playing Death Shadow that they kind of tested my hypothesis that they should play more basics, and they're just like, no, it's just the mana base is just, I don't know. I don't. Maybe other people disagree with me, but I've been informed that the mana base just doesn't work with more than 1 basic. I find that hard to believe, but that's what I've been told, and I mean, hey, I'll take it, because that's exactly what this kind of deck is designed to prey on. Is if they're not playing a healthy amount of basics, then this turns into a 2-mana Stone Rain, draw a card really quickly. This turns into a 3-mana Stone Rain that also nets me a mana pretty quickly. And this turns into Strip Mine pretty quickly. It's like, oh my goodness, when they run out of basics, yeah, the Ponza, the little Ponza kind of strategy I got going on here, it really goes to town. So this deck is so surprisingly fun. I actually trophied with a previous version. I trophied with a previous Wildfire version. That version had Raga-Dragon, but I kind of just ended up, like, I did a big major consolidation, because if you think I've got a lot of red variants right now, you should have seen it before. I had so many, it was out of control. I try to consolidate a little bit, just because if I got too much stuff going on, I feel like it messes with my mind too much. I might even try to consolidate these decks even further, but like, I honestly just don't think this deck needs Raga-Dragon, so I'm more than happy to have the quote budget version, which I don't even think this deck really would benefit that much from adding money to it. But I honestly just kind of settled on consolidating the whole deck into like this kind of budget version where we're not playing Raga-Dragon, we're playing Dragon Rage Channeler, and then we're playing Atsushi. That's what kind of makes a double dragon, is we've got Dragon Rage Channeler and an actual dragon, Atsushi Blazing Sky. And I just like the way Atsushi and Dragon Rage Channeler together, they produce a lot of pressure in the air. I mean, when we're pressuring their lands while also pressuring their life total, I don't know what to say other than that it feels like it's working. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I thought about, and I haven't done this yet, but I've thought about maybe just trying Chandra, the 4-mana, what's it called? Chandra, Torch of Defiance instead of Atsushi, because Chandra is a sweet card, being a removal spell, being mana ramp, and being potential card advantage, and a win condition, all wrapped up into 1 card. I mean, that does sound good, doesn't it? But like, but surprisingly, when I've played Atsushi, it's also just felt pretty good. I mean, I will say the biggest issue is against opposing white decks that have like Solitude or such that can deal with this card. But sometimes they don't. If they don't have Solitude, I mean, this card, if this card trades, then I usually come out ahead because I get those 2 cards, and I almost always use the 2 card ability rather than the treasure tokens. But like, I mean, I would recommend it too, unless you like need the treasure tokens to prevent from dying by playing like a lightning bolt or something. I don't know, but I don't know. There's just a lot of situations. I mean, I don't know. It helps close out the game. Let's put it this way. Atsushi is nice because it's a 4/4 beat stick. It helps you close out the game a little bit faster. Don't forget, like me, that it has trample. I think I forgot a few times that it has trample, and I thought that it could get chump blocked, and you know, just don't. Trample is it doesn't need to have trample, but it does. I think so. You know, that just makes it all the more better. It can be a good blocker because even if you block, you get the two cards. It's really not bad. Oh yeah, and something else too. I think once somebody tried to solitude it, and in response I unholy heated it and got the reckless impulse effect of exiling the top 2 cards, which was absolutely worth it in that context. I don't think there was many targets being presented for unholy heat, and like that is something to keep in mind that you can do too. I mean, plus this card right now I think is a little more budget friendly than Chandra. I think. I mean, I could play Chandra, and if anything, if any major change happens to the deck, I actually don't think it's going to be adding Raga-Dragon. It would probably be adding Chandra instead of Atsushi, but then it would lose the cool name Double Dragon, and maybe it should be called Double Dragon Wildfire. No, I'm just going to call it Double Dragon. Yeah, I don't know what to say about this. I mean, it's got Unholy Heat. Unholy Heat, obviously, together with Dragon Race Channeler, and we got Artifact, Instant, Sorcery, Creature, Land. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, we can get to Delirium. We don't get to Delirium as lightning fast as Is It, Is It Murktide, but like we can and do turn on Delirium without an extraordinary amount of difficulty, and Unholy Heat is 6 damage when it does. It's pretty cool. I mean, everybody knows that, so we need to explain much more. One thing I've really been liking, and which you'll be seeing a lot of in these mid-range decks, is actually Spikefield Hazard. This has replaced Seal of Fire in my previous versions. I've recommended Seal of Fire before. I think if the meta is absolutely infested with Raga-Dragon, Seal of Fire actually probably is marginally better than Spikefield Hazard, because what's even better than having a 1-mana exile effect that you can hold up is having a card that just sticks around and deals with Raga-Dragon even if you tap out, and it's just always there, and like it's just a pain in the butt, and it just will always make Raga-Dragon pretty mediocre if they ever play it. So Seal of Fire is absolutely a house against Raga-Dragon, but I like Spikefield Hazard better over more because, at least at the moment, Raga-Dragon is an omnipresent part of the metagame, but it is not absolutely every single time what you play against all the time. And I just think that in most non-Raga-Dragon matchups, being able to play this as a land is generally better than Seal of Fire, because if Seal of Fire is not going after creatures, it's just kind of not that great. Just I mean, it does help turn on Delirium, but it's just not I like Spikefield Hazard just because the ability to play it as a land is super relevant. Reckless Impulse. I personally think that if you are not playing Obosh, this is the best of these effects where you exile cards out of the private library. I think it's better than Light Up the Stage because we only really have a Dragon Race Channeler to set up playing Light Up the Stage on turn 2, whereas this you can just straight up cast it. I would generally recommend turn 3, but you'd be surprised. One of the advantages this has over Expressive Iteration is that you can just fire this off on turn 2. But do note that if you reveal 2 lands off the top, you won't be able to play both of them. But still, I would recommend playing this because there's just a lot of circumstances where you're not going to have where you're not going to be able to turn on Spectacle, and costing 1 less when you don't have Spectacle is way better, because I actually think most of the time you're actually not, unlike a burn deck, this is not a burn deck, so you're not going to have Spectacle all the time. It's also better than March of Reckless Joy, although March of Reckless Joy actually has a better case to potentially be better than Reckless Impulse, because sometimes actually pumping more mana than just 3 into the Reckless Joy, which I'll get to this more in the Obosh variants, because this has become an absolute staple in those, but most of them at least. But yeah, but at the end of the day, just being cheaper overall is just basically better for the most part. So yeah, if you're not playing Obosh, I think Reckless Impulse, unlocking Reckless Impulse is one of the best. It is a very strong. It's something strong you gain access to, and I would take advantage of that. If you're not playing Obosh, which this deck kind of can't because it's got to play Cleansing Wildfire. So, anyway, Bone Crusher, I don't know that card. Season Power Match, I've already explained. Atsushi, I've explained. Ratchet Bomb, I've explained other decks. I mean, it's very good. All-purpose answer. It's our only way to deal with enchantments and I'll only deal with enchantments for what it's worth. Kozilek's Return, sometimes we need to just clear the board of pro-red creatures. Yeah, Ratchet Bomb can too, but having this sit around while they can potentially Prismatic Ending it or something, like being a sit, or Teferi back to hand, having this just be a sitting duck sitting around ticking up is sometimes not good enough. I just like Kozilek's Return being in here, being able to deal with pro-red creatures in a snap if need be. So Kozilek's Return, I have something like this almost in all of my decks, just because pro-red creatures are just very ubiquitous right now. Cough. Cough. You know, a lot of pro-red creatures, if you know what I mean. It's annoying, but I mean, it's annoying when it's happening against us. It's super cool when we're doing it ourselves to opposing red decks. And not biased at all, but I mean, that's a little tongue in cheek. It's the meta is actually honestly becoming a little dumb that way with just how much red is being played, and conversely, on the same token, how much pro-red is becoming even main deckable sometimes because of just how omnipresent red is. But that's neither here nor there. We got to go to war with the army we have, not the army we want, or rather, we go to war in the metagame we have, not the metagame we want. Maybe it's a better way to explain it. But yeah, we got a braid. It's the only deck that can actually support a braid, I think, or at least supports a braid over pillage. In most of our decks, pillage is kind of a nice flex card that we kind of need access to be able to actually just hard take them off of total land count or deal with basics for a total Blood Moon lock. But in this deck, where we're not primarily on the Blood Moon strategy, a braid being 2 mana, being instant, and being able to deal with creatures is the best option we have, particularly because we don't particularly need more land destruction. That takes us to our last card, which is Mages of the Moon. This card actually started off as Blood Moon as a 3 of, and I used to have 4 Kozilek's Returns. I don't think we need 4 Kozilek's Returns, and 3 is perfectly fine. And yeah, but this morphed into 4 Mages of the Moon, and the idea here is that, see, as a sideboard card, I don't, like, against one of the only decks that I feel like Blood Moon is better than Mages, but since it is a very common deck type, this reason alone actually is a pretty good reason to play Blood Moon, I think, at least in the main over Mages, is Death Shadow, but this deck does pretty well against Death Shadow as is, because again, they only play 1 basic, so our kind of Ponza-ish Cleansing Wildfire, Field of Ruin, Ghost Quarter strategy of taking them off lands does a surprisingly good job. I don't think we necessarily need Blood Moon, maybe Famous Last Words, because Blood Moon is really helpful, because they can't manipulate their life total, period, with Blood Moon down. And Mages just eats a Lightning Bolt. But Mages of the Moon is so much better against Amulet Titan, because they can't Force of Vigor it, they can't Boseiju it. Boseiju who endures, by the way, not, I think I sold my Boseiju, but anyway. Yeah, it's mostly just that this card doesn't get hit by Boseiju, doesn't get hit by Force of Vigor. It's also a beater, so it also increases your clock while it's at it. And it's just, yeah, it also doesn't get hit by Force of Negation from Tomorrow Living End. It does get hit by Solitude, but I mean Subtlety, but I think Subtlety is a little bit of a question mark. I don't think all versions play it. All versions do play Force of Negation, but yeah, I like Mages of the Moon better. Mages of the Moon better overall because in the matchups where I really need the Moon effect, even though it does turn off my Ghost Quarters and Field of the Ruins, I feel like in those matchups, Mages of the Moon is just generally better because it dodges Artifact and Enchantment Hate. So yeah, I really find this deck surprisingly fun. Let's get to last version before we get to the Obosh version. I guess I'm making my way up at this point, but we got mono red control. You know, at this point, I've just resigned to the fact this is gonna be a relatively long video. But yeah, so this version doesn't play Raga-Dragon. I would not call this a budget version though, but this is another way we could take mono red, and this also is kind of a consolidation of the Hammer Bogarden decks that I was toying around with. Yes, I trophied with 2 different takes on Hammer Bogarden. This version I got 3-2. Honestly, those 2 losses felt like total BS to me. Like, what was it? Like, against one deck, the opponent like was basically dead, I think, the next turn, or Chandra might have even been about to ultimate. I can't remember exactly, but no, maybe it wasn't that. But I just felt like I had the game basically on a lock. I had a Ratchet Bomb, I think, this is what it was. I had a Ratchet Bomb that was about to tick up to 2, so I could have, it was facing the Otherworldly Breach grinding station deck, and once I had Ratchet Bomb on 2, it could easily deal with the Breach and the grinding station if they ever came down. But like the turn before, and basically I was killing all their stuff on site. I think I had a Fury that was going to start going on the offense, and I think I don't know. I had the game basically on lock, until I'm guessing they ripped a grinding station or something, or maybe they ripped a I don't know which one they ripped, but they ripped one or two combo pieces off the top the turn before they were gonna get yeah. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. I forget what happened in the other one, but overall, I was really surprised. I felt this deck actually, and granted, I've only played one league so far, which was a 3-2 league. But I mean, when this deck was actually working. I mean, when that sounds bad, but when I felt like the opponent wasn't either getting absurdly lucky, or if I wasn't, I don't want to say, just with very average looking starting hands, I rattled off 3 wins without too much difficulty. So I don't know. Maybe it was just insane good luck on my part. Although again, some of the starting hands I really did not think were going to turn into that great of hands, but I kept them anyway, just for science. And like surprisingly, I mean, like Hammer Garden is just really great recursive energy. This is really like a prison deck if you think about it, but I call it mono red control because it's not really kind of prison, but it's kind of prison. But yeah, I mean, Hammer Garden is just insane as like, you know, for grind, and this deck is kind of all about the grind. Gemstone Caverns together with Chalice was excellent. I don't know what else to say. Just being able to on the draw, you know, play effectively a turn 2 Chalice. Yeah, being able to play turn 2 Chalice even on the draw. Just if we have consistent Chalice on turn 2, whether on the play or the draw, this card does serious work. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. Gemstone Caverns has always been sick. It also just speeds up getting to turn 2 Blood Moon, getting to, oh, not turn 2, turn 3 Blood Moon. Yeah, turn 3 Blood Moon. Chandra Torch of Defiance. Yeah, just everything comes down 1 turn early if we steal the play, so to speak. So yeah, I don't know what else to say. Just that's kind of the concept. This is fundamentally a Chalice deck, so we can't actually play Lightning Bolt or Raga-Dragon, which, you know, does make it a little more budget friendly. Although unfortunately Chalice is not budget friendly, but yeah. But Spikefield Hazard actually is a surprisingly good 1-mana burn spell, and I really like this because we can play this, despite the fact that we have Chalice, because once we have Chalice down, we just play this as a land. It's really no big deal. But the fact that this can deal with opposing Raga-Vans, or Dragon Rage Channelers, or whatever 1-drops, or whatever, like, 1-toughness creatures they play before we drop Chalice, and then still just not miss a beat and still provide value to the deck once we drop Chalice, I love Spikefield Hazard in a main deck Chalice deck. And this is our main deck Chalice mono red deck, and it's also, yeah, like I said, a consolidation of the Hammer decks, being the closest thing I have to an actual prison deck. Now, yeah, main deck Ratchet Bomb. We don't have Blast Zone, so, you know, being able to deal with an artifact enchantments in the main deck can be kind of good. It's honestly though just kind of the most main deckable card. I don't feel like I can support Relic when I've got main deck Chalice. It could be the only 1-drop, but I kind of like having no true actual 1-drops in the main deck for conflict purposes. I mean, it could be Pillage, but honestly, I think Ratchet Bomb's the most main deckable out of all these sideboard cards. So Ratchet Bomb in the main deck to me makes a lot of sense. So Reality Hemorrhage, this must look like, what on earth's going here? Why is this card? Why am I playing this card? Why am I playing in the main? So hear me out, okay? Stomp was always very serviceable. So we know 2 mana for 2 damage, while not necessarily ideal, is something that can make the deck work. I mean, yeah, we could play like Cathartic Power, something 2 mana for 3 damage, or draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. Like there are other options we could play, or just good old Bone Crusher, you know, Stomp. But like the thing about Reality Hemorrhage, okay, is that we either, in my opinion, have to play Reality Hemorrhage main, or we have to play Kozilek's Turn in the sideboard. But I want access to Magus, Pillage, Relic, and Ensnaring Bridge in the sideboard. I really want Ensnaring Bridge when I'm main decking for separate reasons, both Hammer and Chandra, because that turbocharges the ability of Hammer to really be successful. But I like Reality Hemorrhage better overall, I think, than Kozilek's Turn in this deck at least, because we don't have a lot of 2 mana, a lot of burn spells that cost less than 3 mana. I mean, we've basically only got Spikefield Hazard, Reality Hemorrhage, and kind of Fury, although that can't work with instant speed. But like, I just like the way Reality Hemorrhage, it costs 2 mana, especially with Gemstone Caverns. We could potentially just, you know, play that on turn 2 and hopefully hit like a Stoneforge Mystic or something, even possibly at the end of their turn. But like, the main point, obviously, is is that just displays so many pro red creatures, excuse me, in the meta right now. It's just absolutely nuts. So it is really nice to have this either in the main or the side. This would normally be kind of more of a sideboard card, but it's absolutely main deckable. And sometimes you'll be able to grab, deal with an opposing pro red creature out of the main deck, which I'm seeing more and more of these days. So preemptively having answers to that definitely is nice. But of course, Chalice, Ratchet Bomb kind of does that too. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's just playing it in the main means we don't have to play it in the sideboard. And believe me, I do love mages for the same reason as I do in the Double Dragon deck. Just immune to artifact gem removal is huge. I definitely need pillage, like I said, for dealing with basics and dealing with artifacts outright, without having to ratchet up the Ratchet Bomb. Relic, this is the best graveyard hate, enough said. But just feel like main decking it is a little bit of a no go with Chalice. Snaring Bridge, again with Hammer and Chandra, I think this card's at its best. Other than that, we got our Reckless Impulses, Blood Moons in the main. Valakut is actually at its best here in this version, so I actually think this card can end up taking Den of the Bugbear's slot. And I guess technically Sinka doesn't do anything in this deck because we actually don't have a legendary creature. But having this in the main deck might throw them off and think we have a Raga-van. I probably would think we had Raga-van, so they could play around a Raga-van we don't have, which because of dash is something that absolutely they may hold back blockers to block a non-existent dashing monkey. So I keep Shinka in, not really much of a downside to that. And this card's just a house, so glad to have this in the mix. Couldn't have this, by the way, in Double Dragon because, again, just like the mono black deck, we need a healthy amount of basics. More so just because we don't want to run out of them rather than because of a Blood Moon or anything. But yeah, but if we don't have to worry about fetching basics out of our own deck, then like Shokan, whatever, Sokan-Zan, this is where it's at. But yeah, Valakut Awakening is particularly nice because this can cash in extra copies of Chalice, extra copies of Ratchet Bomb, extra copies of anything really, including like if we got more hammers than we realistically need. Whatever it is, we can Valakut Awakening surprisingly does a lot of work, and I do think it is better in this deck than the Bugbear. And the reason why is that if you think about it, Den of the Bugbear, if we're playing a Gemstone Caverns, it kind of is going to come into play tapped. It's going to mess up our turn 3 play. Whereas, Valakut might not. Valakut both has the upside of being able to ditch chalices and stuff, which we kind of uniquely need to do in a more Prisionish, control-ish type of deck. But unlike Den of the Bugbear, if we play Gemstone Caverns on turn 0, think about it. If we have Valakut and a Mountain, we could play Valakut on turn 1, I guess. Whatever. Yeah, I guess technically our turn 1 we can play Valakut, but our pseudo turn 2 because I'm kind of and then we can play Mountain on our pseudo turn 3, and then play Blood Moon on Curve. Whereas with Den of the Bugbear, if we're playing Gemstone Caverns in our pseudo turn 1, stealing the play so to speak. From their turn. If we play this on our pseudo turn 1, then we'd have to play Den of the Bugbear on our turn 2. Otherwise, it'd just come into play tapped anyway after that. But then, if our hand was Gemstone Caverns, Mountain, Bugbear, unlike Gemstone Caverns, Mountain, and Valakut, we wouldn't be able to guarantee Blood Moon on Curve because we'd play Gemstone to steal the play. Then I guess we could opt not to play Bugbear, but then it would come into play tap next turn anyway. We could play Mountain, but then Bugbear comes into play tapped on the 3rd turn. Wait a minute, maybe not a good example because okay, actually, you know what? Not a good example because obviously you just play it on turn 2, then you play the Mountain. Well, I guess what I meant to say is if you think about it, I really don't think we can go down to 2 basics. We could, but we just expose ourselves so much to running out of basics. Yeah, and I like Valakut enough that I think. To be fair, actually, I could just cut the Shinka, the Sokenzen, and then play the Den of the Bugbears. That is definitely possible. But cutting any amount of actually these basic-ish deck cards for and I call these cards basic-ish because they have no downside. For Den of the Bugbear, that's actually a problem because if we have 2 of these, we can play Blood Moon on Curve. Whereas if we have Bugbear, 2 Bugbears, or if we have Gemstone, whatever, land plus, Mountain plus Valakut, then yeah, we can get Blood Moon on Curve. I think you all get the point. The point is that Bugbear having to guarantee come into play tapped on turn 3 is more of a problem than usual when we have 8 comes into play tapped lands as opposed to the usual 4. So it's kind of how I see that there. So Skull Smashing, I think in a control-ish kind of deck, it's just very awesome that one of our lands, I mean, it can always come to play untapped if really need be, even if we have to take 3 damage. But the fact that this can also be not just a removal spell, but a removal spell that can both deal with some of the most absurdly large things later in the game when we have enough mana, which we will, and can also deal, 2 for 1 them too by dealing with 2 things later in the game. We have enough mana for it, obviously. It's just it's really good, and I just really like having access. Okay, well, all right, back to the one I'm playing now, kind of analysis of decks that I've been tinkering around with. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is going to be combined, or I might just upload these videos as 2 separate videos. Hopefully, people like it enough that they don't like mess with the algorithm or something. But yeah, I hope you all enjoy it. Anyway, I think I'm basically done discussing this deck. I've already sang the praises of Hammer. You all know Seasoned Pyromancer. I explained Chandra actually in the previous Double Dragon deck when I, pondered possibly playing it. How it's a creature removal spell, mana ramp, card advantage engine, and win condition all wrapped in one. So definitely nice to have in a control deck. I'll tell you that much for sure. And Fury, win condition and excellent removal spell wrapped into one, and ability to deal with multiple weaknesses. So I mean, we all know Fury is a pretty busted card. It took a while for people to realize that. I actually thought at first it was busted. Then I played it in a Prowess deck and it wasn't as great as I thought. And then but then obviously I realized, oh snap, it's yeah, it obviously is great. Yeah. So yeah, let's actually get on to the next deck, which is so we got Sun, Obosh, Sun and Moon. This is by far the most gimmicky of the Obosh decks that I have. We got Gemstone Caverns in the mix, so I'm not going to rehash that like the Mono Red Control deck that we just went over. But, yeah, and by the way, you can see on my previous video where in my previous video I went over Mono Black Midrange, Mono Blue Midrange, Jegantha, Prowess Burn, yeah, Red White Burn, Obosh Burn, Double Dragon, Mono Red Control, and so now we're going to Obosh Sun and Moon. So yeah, so this is by far one of the most gimmicky decks, like I said, but hear me out here, okay? The cool thing about this deck is since we got both Raga-Dragon and Gemstone Caverns, we have one of the highest possibilities in terms of playable, really solid mana ramp type options. Yeah, there's Striker Rich and there's other types of things we could be playing, but I think Gemstone Caverns is honestly just one of the best mana ramp tools we have available to us. But yeah, the odds that we play an early Blood Sun and potentially turn off their fetches goes up a lot, and that actually was better in testing than I might have thought. And what's really cool about Blood Sun is that in and of itself can be kind of devastating, depending on how many fetches you turn off and how early you turn them off. With Blood Sun, that alone can be good, but what's also really cool, which I didn't realize at first, but the more I played with this, the more I realized that I used to think these cards were non-bows, Blood Moon and Blood Sun, but they're actually not. How well they actually work together is something I didn't realize at first, but then I did, the more I played with it. You might think that these are non-bows because Blood Sun turns off the Blood Sun turns off the fetches, but then Blood Moon makes the fetches at least tap for red, which can be kind of like a colorless source, even if they don't have anything to do with red. But they're actually better together than I thought, because one thing that I didn't consider was that, for the most part, the way most decks grab their basics is through fetch lands. Yes, you've got some decks like Elves that have a healthy amount of forests, at least I think they do, in the main deck anyway, even without fetches. The vast majority of modern decks are getting their basics through fetch lands. What does that mean? That means if we drop an early enough Blood Sun, then they can't fetch their basics, and that means that they're basically held in abeyance until Blood Moon drops, and basically they're held in a state, since they can't fetch their basics, that whenever we draw Blood Moon, whenever Blood Moon's ready to drop, when it drops, it just kind of locks them out of the game on the spot, because Blood Sun was already preventing them from fetching basics. So these two, you could look at them as kind of a non-bow, because the Blood Moon turns on the uncracked fetch lands, but actually I think overall the ways in which they complement each other definitely outweigh the ways in which they work against each other. So I think that these are actually a good compliment, and they do constitute the sun and the moon, so, you know, there is that. And I guess it's odd that the most gimmicky kind of version of the Obosh mid-range decks is the one I'm going over first, but I just happen to be progressing in a kind of odd way down to up because of how I went over the burn decks. I went by kind of archetype first. But yeah, what else is there to say? I mean, I explained Spikefield Hazard. We all know Raga-Dragon being able to jump from 1 to 3, and Obosh deck is kind of like almost a requirement. If this card ever gets banned, I hope that they either immediately reprint it or even just go back to power level errata like they used to back in the day. But I really want, if they take away the exile effect, that's fine. I just like this being able to mana ramp. At least that's me. But yeah. But anyway, Spikefield Hazard, removal and land. Like I said before, just awesome. Bone Crusher Giant, removal and creature. It's really good and card advantage. Seasoned Pyromancer, I mean, you know, one of the most consistent sources of card advantage. 3 for 1 and 2 tokens out of the graveyard, especially good against control because of that. It's super great. Fury, I already explained that previously. I mean, these are great cards. And March of Reckless Joy, I think I already explained this when I was comparing this hypothetically to Reckless Impulse in the last video, but this actually is one of the standout cards for these archetypes because the ability of this card to be played early on, you know, exiling any old card in my hand and, you know, playing 2 cards off the top, that's great for breaking out of early mana stalls where I need to hit my land drops and I can turbocharge through the deck a little bit early on at the cost of pitching a card, which is well worth it. Even if I end up not being able to play well for them, just hitting land drops more consistently is sometimes worth it. But oftentimes I will be able to cast both of them because it'll be like a land and a Bone Crusher or something. So I play like a land and I either stomp or just play the Bone Crusher outright or whatever it is. It's very good early in the game, but it's also super good late in the game. Yes, you can never play more than 2 cards off the top, but I think what people are forgetting is it's really solid card selection later in the game if you have a lot of mana. Let's say you have like 6 mana, and like you got a couple different options. I mean, you could play it for 3 in the hopes that you draw like a Seasoned Pyromancer, and then, you know. But what a lot of times actually you should consider doing is, especially if they're not playing a control deck or something, and you know, obviously if they're tapped out, you might want to just go for it while they're tapped out. But if they're not playing a control deck, or you otherwise just don't think they're in a position where they can or want to counter or whatever, a lot of times consider the possibility that instead of just firing this off for 3 mana when you have 6 total mana, you know, to X equals 2, and then just play whatever 2 cards you get off the top. Consider waiting until the end of their turn. I mean, obviously, if they play like a Raga-Dragon or something, depending on the circumstances, you may just have to. Well, you actually have a surprising amount of options if you wait until the end of their turn, because let's say they do play Raga-Dragon, then if you got 6 mana, you can march for 5, so X equals 4, and then you have a pretty decent chance of hitting a Spikefield Hazard or a Lightning Bolt or something. I mean, you'd have 4 times, well, not 4, you have double the chance of hitting it than if you had played it on turn 3 at sorcery speed. And this is an instant. It's important to remember, this card is an instant. It's an instant speed kind of light up the stage type effect, which we haven't actually seen yet. And it being an instant speed, like I said, is a bigger deal than it seems because of that. For one thing, they might not dash the Raga-Dragon or play it at all until you're forced to use the burn spell if you just fire this off as a sorcery. But if you wait until their turn, okay, let's say they play a Raga-Dragon, you can X equals 4, so 5 mana total, keeping 1 mana untapped, and, you know, try to spike a Lightning Bolt or a Lava Spike, you know, 4 cards deep. Or maybe it's better to say if you've got 6 mana, maybe you do X equals 3, and then you can also hit a Stomp too, if that's the case. But either way, you have that option. But if they don't play something like Raga-Dragon that you have to deal with, you know, that's dashing, what you can do is you can tap all your mana, X equals 5, you know, so tap 6, so X equals 5, and you are looking 5 cards deep, and a lot of times in these situations where the game goes long, you just kind of want to dig into more Seasoned Pyromancers to keep the gravy train flowing, and the odds that you will find 1 or even 2 Seasoned Pyromancers go up a lot when you X equals 5 with March of Reckless Joy. And even 2 Seasoned Pyromancers can work if you got 6 mana, because, for example, you can pay 1, you can play 1, draw 2 cards, maybe one of them is a land or something, you play it, maybe you play like a relic or something you draw off the top, or just fire off a Lightning Bolt, or just, you know, pitch the other card, just play the other Seasoned Pyromancer, and then bam. I mean, but either way, one of the main ways we lose with these kind of decks, especially since we're not playing Hammer Garden in most of them, other than the prison kind of control version, I mean, that's one of the things I like about March of Reckless Joy is it enables the deck to grind like crazy. It hits its land. It allows hitting land drops early. It allows it to grind crazy later in the game without having to resort to cards that look like nonsense like Hammer Garden, but are actually deceptively better than they look. But nonetheless, you don't have to play Hammer Garden and look really janky, which maybe is a big deal to a lot of people. But like you don't have to, and it's probably better. And I mean, I'm doing it. So for what it's worth, I think that's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say other than March of Reckless Joy. It's good early, it's good late. It's very flexible. You have the option to pump a lot of mana into it. You have an option to hold it up and play it at instant speed. Against control, sometimes that's huge because sometimes they're obviously holding up like a cryptic command or a counter spell or something. You just wait till the end of the turn, so at least they have to tap the lands on their turn. There's a lot going for this card, more than meets the eye, and it's basically an absolute staple in most Obosh decks at this time. I think basically just the versions that are playing Chandra, Dress to Kill, kind of prefer Light Up the Stage instead because it's so good together with Chandra, because Chandra's uptick adds the 1 mana and the 1 damage to face to turn on Spectacle for 1, so, you know. But other than that, yeah, this card is the real deal. So, you know, sideboard, pillage, may just explain those before in my previous video on the mono red control deck, but suffice it to say, pillage is great at dealing with basics and artifacts outright. Magus is an excellent, moon effect that, unlike Blood Moon, cannot be hit with Bush Age Shoulders All or Force Vigor. So, very, very nice to have access to these in the sideboard, so that you can hate more effectively on the decks that don't want their non-basics to be mountains, which is actually surprisingly a large amount of them. So then we got the Trinispheres, which I don't even know if Trinisphere is really worth it or not, but for what it's worth, I think the deck that this card has been most hosing has been Burn, which I'll take. But in theory, I think it also hosted an Is It Phoenix deck once, because all their cantrips costed 3, their Metamorphoses, basically made less mana instead of being mana neutral, and it really does mess with the Is It Phoenix deck. There's not a lot of Is It Phoenix, but I don't know. I mean, it can also kind of deal with Cascade, although against Rhinos, they can kind of afford to wait until turn 6 to play the Cascader and pay the extra 3. But against a lot of other Cascade decks where they're more all in and they want to combo quickly, yeah, it's not. Trinisphere really helps against those. It's too bad they don't stack multiple instances, so they can always just pay 6 mana for it when they get to it. But since it would take a while, Trinisphere can potentially work there. Oblivion Stone as a 2-of. I mean, this is just an unfortunate nod to the fact that since we're playing Gemstone, we're not playing Blast Zone, which means we kind of need some way to deal with enchantments. I guess we kind of have pillars to deal with artifacts, but we need a way to deal with enchantments. We also need a way to deal with pro-red creatures, since we don't actually either have Close Turn or Blast Zone. So so we need a way to deal with pro-red creatures, and I don't know. Oblivion Stone is kind of slow, but it does it all, and with Gemstone Caverns in the mix and Raga-Dragon, this is one of the versions that I think is most capable of boosting the mana enough to where we can reliably use an Oblivion Stone if we draw one. So, I mean, I don't know. For whatever reason, this deck looks janky as heck, but it actually kind of worked, at least last time I played it. Alright, now I'll skip these for, now I'll just get to them, because these are kind of in the same spirit. So, we got the Saga, the Obosh Saga variants. And the first one is the Saga-van with DRC version. This is very nice. I don't think Dragon Race Channeler is strictly necessary, but I do really like, I mean, this is unfortunate, but I do really feel like Raga-Dragon is highly recommended in this deck, and since Urza Saga already costs a pretty penny, I mean, I'd imagine most people who want to spring for the Urza Sagas probably either have Raga-Dragon or have the ability to obtain it without too much pain, so yeah. Raga-Dragon in particular is just so sweet with Urza Saga, because any unused tokens just juice those tokens up, real good. But yeah, I don't know what to say. Dragon Race Channeler, I mean, it incidentally gets Delirium pretty decently. We got the some fetch lands for that. The usual land suite are discussed. And the Bugbear is so great because it's just mostly free. you know, Urza Saga's enchantment goes to the graveyard, and then when it does, I mean, you've got your choice of Pyrite Spellbomb for removal or Soul Guide Lantern for graveyard hate, and you know, and a redraw, of course. Now, one of the things that I get asked about is why am I not playing something like, say, Bowmite Courier in the main to also fetch because it's a creature? Well, I mean, if you think about it, Urza Saga already creates creatures just by itself without before it fetches. So I just don't feel like fetching a creature is really necessary. I could be wrong, but it's kind of how I analyze it. I don't play Shadow Spear main. There are a lot of decks where Shadow Spear is excellent, but there are also a lot of decks where it's pretty mediocre, and the life gain doesn't really matter that much, or the trample, or the +1/+1 for that matter. So, you know, I think keeping it in a sideboard makes perfect sense, at least to me. Again, Dragon Race Channeler just happens to be incidentally a lot. We do have to play Light Up to Stage instead of March of Reckless Joy, because we do need at least one sorcery, so we can get Delirium more consistently. You know, again, explain Unholy Heat. Explain Season Pyromancer, previous video. You know, Spike Field, I think that previous video was Obosh control, but, you know, suffice it to say Season Pyromancer is pretty nuts in the Sun and Moon deck too, but yeah, as is Fury. But yeah. Yeah, Season Pyromancer, Spike Field Hazard, I definitely explained. Lightning Bolt, enough said. And, you know, Experimental Synthesizer, okay? You know, I mean, if there was ever any deck where Experimental Synthesizer has a place, I would think it would be the Obosh Saga decks, because think about what this brings to the table. This can just help you hit your land drops, because whatever you burn off, if you play this starting on turn 2 without playing a land drop, this will either burn a non-land card off the top, in which case you're one card closer to drawing land, or this will burn a land off the top that you can actually play off of this synthesize ability. So either way, it'll help you hit your land drops, you know, assuming you need to. If you don't need to, you can just hold this until later on, maybe, and, you know, just hope that whatever it hits is a card you want to play. But the fact that it also just juices up the Urza's tokens while it's just sitting around, you know, kind of waiting to turn into a 2/2 Samurai and get you another card. But the fact that while you're waiting for that, it juices up the Urza's tokens, I mean, that's the real deal. So I love the card. Obviously, we're playing Urza Saga. I did have some previous versions with Blood Moon, but I just bit the bullet and I just said, okay, let's just do Alpine Moon. And, you know, we haven't ran into Amulet Titan much, at least with this deck, I don't think, yet. We do have Unholy Heat, though, it's worth noting. This does one-shot a Titan, so maybe we're not completely out to lunch without Blood Moon, but yeah, Alpine Moon. The cool thing about Alpine Moon is that if we name Urza Saga, we deal with their Urza Sagas, but it doesn't actually deal with ours. Yeah, and then we got Shattering Spree, because we're not a Blood Moon deck, I don't think we really care too much about dealing with basics, because the difference between basics and non-basics is kind of irrelevant. So we'll just play Shattering Spree, a super powerful artifact take card. This really helps dealing with like Affinity decks, like Mono Blue Affinity, so nice to have that in the mix. And then we got Shadow Spear, which I already explained. I like it in the sideboard because then it's basically guaranteed to only come in when in matchups where it actually is what you're looking for. I'll get to the Pith Needles in a second. But Elixir of Immortality. I mean, for the most part, this card might seem a little overdone with Shadow Spear, but the fact that, like, even if they have some kind of answer to the construct tokens, like for example, Shattering Spree, the construct token, Elixir of Immortality is great because they actually can't like Shattering Spree this. I mean, they could, but as long as you have 2 mana untapped, you can sacrifice it, you know, and then not only not lose the 3 life from Shattering Spree, but gain 5. This can be pretty good in some circumstances against Burn for that reason. You can play around certain stuff, and if all you need to do is survive one more turn, a lot of times 5 damage is certainly going to do that, even if it's not as good long term as Shadow Spear drawing, you know, gaining life every single turn. But one of the main things is also we don't really have that much of a plan against Mill, and this actually does help out a lot against Mill. I mean, I guess we have a decently fast clock, so maybe we don't need to be worried about Mill too much, but, you know, that is cool. It's also excellent against Dronalok because we can pay 2, tap, and basically counter the Dronalok because we Exalt Graveyard, so I guess that's cool too. Yeah, so anyway, that's Saga-van DRC. Then we've also got Saga-van Chandra. So what are we going on? What are we doing here? So this is similar. We're not playing Dragon Range Channeler, but in exchange, okay, exchange the Dragon Range Channeler for, I think, basically Chandra. Yeah, basically exchange the Dragon Range Channeler for Chandra, and we exchange the Unholy Heat for Fury. And Fury is an insanely good card, so I'd say in most matchups that is a better swap, but obviously when you really need Unholy Heat, you really need it. So there's something to be a little concerned about maybe. Other than that, it's basically the same deck, but dropping Dragon Channel enables us to accommodate Chandra to kill. And let me tell you, Chandra can go nuts when she has an army defending her. And thanks to Urzasaka, it's never been easier having an army to defend our Red Princess here. Yeah, let's see the sideboard. Alpine Moon, same as before. Flame Slash. This is excellent to team up with Fury to deal with Murktide Regent, because that's 8 damage pretty cleanly. I really like having access to Flame Slash and Fury, unless I've got some other avenue protection against is it Murktide, so that is nice. Shattering Spree. Yeah, again, since we're not playing Blood Moon, I think the need to hit basics is kind of minimal, so you know, just having this card is pretty good here. Pithing Needle, just hey, it's not a 4 of like the other deck, but at the end of the day, if we need it, we can go fetch it with Urzasaka and hopefully use it. Yeah, that kind of does it for this deck. I mean, it is pretty cool to go Raga-Dragon into turn 2 Chandra into light up the stage, but like, you know, that's not only the Urzasaka thing, that we've also got the regular prowess, I mean, a regular Obosh version like that. Then we've got the Obosh Raga-Dragon deck. So it combines Raga-Dragon and Dragon Race Channeler, and just like the other deck, so we do have. Wait a minute. Yeah, so this deck is Soul Guide Lantern. Yeah, so this deck is similar. It's got Soul Guide Lantern, obviously, because Relic would just snoop the graveyard, and then Dragon Race Channeler does have Delirium, but Soul Guide Lantern doesn't really have that issue. We play a couple basics to accommodate. I mean, a couple fetches to accommodate the Dragon Race Channeler, but overall, yeah, I mean, this is pretty basic stuff I've already explained, just shuffled around in a different form. Playing Unholy Heat in the sideboard. It's either that or play Fury in the sideboard, and I think main deck Fury is a lot better than main deck Unholy Heat, especially since it's also card advantage late in the game. But yeah, and then of course there's Pillage. You know, Pillage dealing with basics, stuff like that. And of course artifacts. And then we've got Mages of the Moon, again, doesn't hit by artifact or enchantment hate, of which there is a lot, particularly in the decks that are particularly vulnerable to Blood Moon, so nice to have that to supplement Blood Moon in games 2 and 3. And then there's a Kozilek's Return, which as a 2 of, you know, I generally like having access to some kind of decent, reliable way to deal with pro-red creatures without necessarily having to juice up the Blast Zone 1 turn in advance, although I guess it's nice to have both options. So, yeah. Yeah, and I like Unholy better in the sideboard just because, in theory, it's kind of not useful against certain control decks and most combo decks. And I say certain control decks, most control decks I do think actually use Planeswalkers, of which Unholy Heat is pretty good, but if they're not playing Planeswalkers or lands, then yeah, Unholy Heat. If they are playing lands. Oh, anyway, what am I talking about playing lands? Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe it's getting a little late, and I'm sorry if I just said something that doesn't make any sense. Maybe I fell a little bit asleep for a second there. But either way, Unholy Heat, it's pretty good. Yeah, not lands. I meant Planeswalkers. Yeah, I don't know why I said lands, but yeah, if they're playing Planeswalkers, then Unholy Heat can be pretty good. But not all do. Like a lot of Is It Blue Moon decks don't really play Planeswalkers, or they play just a couple like Jaces or something. Anyway, either way, something here or there. This deck, as you can see, did trophy. Actually, as did the Saga-van Chandra deck. This deck trophied. It's pretty cool. And we got Fable. And Fable is very similar to the other decks I was showing. We do have Relic here in the main deck again, which I actually think the Sun and Moon deck had. Yeah, it had Relic. There's just so many. There's still graveyard decks out and about. It still actually hoses Tarmogoyf, even though it's not a dedicated graveyard deck. Still hoses Ren and 6. Still hoses randomly hoses Dredge. Tomorrow Living End, you get the drill. But yeah, and I mean all these other cards I've basically explained. But Fable the Mirror Breaker, I think like I said a little bit previously in the last video, this is an underrated card. It's guaranteed to get that 2/2. That 2/2, if you need an extra mana, is almost guaranteed to get it unless they just deal with the token outright. And if they do, you know, it filters a little bit on the next chapter, and then on the final chapter, it turns into Kiki-Jiki basically. Now, unfortunately, the Kiki-Jiki itself doesn't have haste, but you can do nutty things if this thing actually does turn into Kiki-Jiki. And the main thing is actually copying Seasoned Pyromancer or Fury sometimes, and then getting a copy and then keep using the abilities. So it can be kind of oppressive once it gets going. But the cool thing is it's just pretty decent card in its own right, even if you don't actually draw Seasoned Pyromancer or Furies, or if they don't live. Because if you think about it, it is a 3-mana card that that will ultimately end up producing two bodies of 4 power total. Seasoned Pyromancer is a 3 mana card that will ultimately result in producing 6 mana. You know, 2 of which was a 2/2, and 4 of which were 1/1s. And I say 4 of which because the tokens from the graveyard have to be counted as a card advantage too. But if you take the flashing back from the graveyard out of the equation, Seasoned Pyromancer is basically 3 mana, put 4 power on the table, divided over multiple bodies, and then filter 2. And guess what also dumps, first 2 power onto the battlefield, and then another 2 power onto the battlefield later on, but in between also filters 2 cards. So, it's actually surprisingly similar to Seasoned Pyromancer, and, I don't know, this might not be a budget card forever if you're on a budget, but I think this card is actually the real deal in a red mid-range type of deck. And a trophy with it, so, hey, it worked there. Again, we got the Flame Slashes, mostly for Izzet Murktide, but also for, just a lot of decks that play more creatures. Just having more creature removal is sometimes just really nice. Mage's Pillage, I was trying to think I'll explain that all in the Raga-Dragon deck. Obosh Dress to Kill. Yeah, this is our non-Saga kind of Chandra version. It's basically the same thing as the Fable version, just with Chandra. Also trophy with this deck, so it's kind of difficult to know which is better, Fable or Chandra. But it's kind of fun testing both of them and seeing which one's better. And which one's better may depend a lot on the meta. Some metas, there might be easy Planeswalker removal, in which case Fable's probably better. But if there's easy token removal, then, maybe Chandra's better. I don't know. Easier token removal than Planeswalker removal, at least. Okay, 8 Relic. I don't know. Basically what this is the same version as Dress to Kill. If you think about it, it's just taking out Chandra Dress to Kill to play Lantern of the Lost, another Relic, and yes, in the main deck. Now, I could probably play Flame Slash here. Maybe I should. And play the other relics as sideboard cards. But you know what? This is actually kind of not. This actually worked better than I thought. And these, graveyard removal cards, they can really come in handy against Tarmogoyf in a lot of different decks. We also play 4 Horizon Lands, whereas the other decks just play 10 basics. We play 6 and play 4 Horizon Lands. So that's just because the curve is a lot smaller, not having the Fables or the Chandras or anything. So I could definitely see main decking Flame Slash, though, in the place of the Lantern. But for the time being, hey, we trophied with the main deck Lantern, having 8 Lanterns in the main. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say. Just it worked, and I guess I'm not sure what else to. I don't know what else to say. And so that takes care of the mono red decks. I think we're actually past all the mono red decks, and so that takes us lastly to the mono white decks. Now, I do have to note that I did scrap the Infect deck, and I'm sorry to the fans of that deck, but maybe I'll rebuild it sometime, but I don't know, because honestly, I was trying to make it work, but there was one league where I would have gone 3-2 if I didn't make a pretty horrendous misplay on the final game. But that's another thing about Infect. I have kind of the same critique of Infect as I had when I tried Hammer Time once, and maybe Hammer Time I just needed to practice with more. I don't know, but I didn't particularly like the play patterns when I tried it. But the thing about Infect is similar to Hammer Time. It just felt like the only way I won is if my opponent misplayed, which I suppose did happen sometimes, but it just felt like whenever my opponent was not misplaying, it just felt like I had no chance. When they were holding up mana, I guess I could just keep going for it, but they always seem to have it. But the point is yeah, just I think let's just go to the white deck, and also because all these decks have all the other colors besides green have a few things in common. They can all play mid-range decks in a sense because all of them have pretty decent answers. Red obviously has Burn, blue has Counter Magic and Mount, black has Discard and Destroy effects, and white has Exile effects. So it's pretty good stuff. Blink Blade, Blast Zone. Enough said. This is in basically some variant or another of all of our different colored decks that we have. Here it's no exception. It still does the same thing. Even in a deck that actually does have plenty good artifact and enchant removal, still. That's just how good Blast Zone is. It's still really good in those types of decks. And yeah, we got Field or Ruin, but same thing as explained in the mono black deck. It has some built-in color fixing. So it's just great for dealing with Urza Saga, because actually, unlike the black deck, we actually don't have any other way to deal with Urza Saga. So we kind of do need Field or Ruin. Cape of the Frost Dragon, it's it kind of has the least flashy upside, but like it is ultimately just a man land and for very little cost. 10 planes. We need plenty of planes to fetch out with. Field of Ruin, Ganjo, Seat of the Empire. Now we have 23 lands. Why do we have 23 lands? Well, it's because we have added, I think, we have added an extra equipment, which prevents this from being 22 lands. And the extra equipment is Lion Sash. Now, why is, or 24, I guess this is, instead of being 24, it's 23, and it's because of Lion Sash. Now, Lion Sash, I think, is an underrated card. Yeah, it's not scavenging use, but like it can grow if needed, and if they tap themselves out. But it's also just kind of good at hitting graveyard cards. This could be a great way to tutor up some kind of graveyard hate, because we actually don't have any graveyard hate as a main otherwise. So yeah, I really like it, and yeah, I think good things are going to come out of it. The Ephemerate is kind of what puts the Blink into the Blink Blade. Almost everything has an enter ability clause. Path to Exile, best removal spell ever, and sometimes in response to killing a Thraben Inspector or Wall of Omens, I could just get a land out of it, especially if they're like a control deck without much else going on. That is cool. That's a way that we can get advantage out of Path to Exile, even in matchups where you'd think we wouldn't have any advantage. Mortar Pod is actually a lot better than it looks, in my humble opinion. Because there's a lot of 1 toughness creatures like Dragonways Channel, at least before Delirium, like Raga-Dragon, but also Dark Confidence sometimes, and like the Champion of the Perished, Thalia's Lieutenant, Thalia itself. I mean, at least before they start getting counters or whatever. But like, yeah, Mortar Pod, it does more work than it seems, but it's also kind of reach. If you get them down to 3 life and you got like 3 Wall of Omens, I mean, if they don't have an easy way to deal with the Wall of Omens, like if they're a burn deck or something, then boom, 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 finish them off for 3 mana. So yeah, it's a pretty good card. Stoneforge Mystic, if you're playing white, enough said. But yeah. Wall of Omens, I mean, best blink target because it just straight up draws a card, and it's also pretty good defensively too. So I mean, I kind of wish I could somehow attack with it and that it would somehow do damage, but also didn't break the game, which I don't know how that's possible. So I'm wishing for something that can't be true. But I mean, Wall of Omens just being a wall, just drawing a card, being a good ephemerate target, I think alone is pretty good. But also don't forget Thraben Inspector can be also an ephemerate target, as can Stoneforge Mystic actually, if you haven't exhausted all your equipment yet. And of course Solitude, and Flicker Wisp actually can be. But yeah, pretty good stuff. Sword of Fire and Ice I think is the best sword in the main deck, because its abilities are always pretty much useful, even if the pro red and pro blue aren't. Flicker Wisp, just very good to get extra value if we blink a Thraben Inspector or Wall of Omens, or Stoneforge Mystic, or Solitude sometimes, but it rarely comes up. But also don't forget that we can ephemerate our own Flicker Wisp either at the end of our turn, because then the exile card won't come back until the end of their turn, or at any time where we need to exile something till the end of their turn. We can basically just Flicker Wisp, as long as it's at the end of our turn, or any time during their turn that isn't the end of their turn. So yeah, Flicker Wisp still actually can be pretty good. Rest in Peace, maybe this should just be Relic, but I like Rest in Peace in some matches like Murktide, where it prevents them from ever playing Murktide, other than as an 8 mana 3/3, which is, needless to say, kind of overcosted. Or 7 mana 3/3, my bad. Settled Wreckage, just very, very good against Temur Brino, very, very good against most Death Shadow, I think, very, very good against a lot of different, or Domain Zoo. There's a lot of decks where just this card can just go nuts. And then we've got, Body and Mind, Sword of Body and Mind, Sword of Light and Shadow. So here's the deal, okay? Light and Shadow, I mean, we're mostly playing this for the pro white and pro black effect, but the life gain is also pretty good against like Burn. The creature recursion can be useful too sometimes, although sometimes it's going to be a non-bo with our Rest in Peace. Body and Mind, one of the most underrated swords. This one, I know if we don't have a Rest in Peace out, then milling cards may actually end up helping them. But the fact that this mills cards can actually give us a way to win, even if they gain infinite life in what's it called? That infinite Heliod against a green-white Heliod. But also just the 2/2 Wolf token is basically always going to be useful, kind of like sort of Fire and Ice. I mean, it's definitely not as universally useful as Fire and Ice, but But Pro Green is actually no joke too. You go right through the Tarmogoyf, right through Elves. Like Green is actually a pretty fairly played color, at least for creatures. So the protection is actually uniquely going to be kind of relevant for this sword. So this is good. And actually, it is particularly useful against Amulet Titan, which I think there's a video of me actually kind of grinding them out with it. Because if you send enough Primeval Titans into the graveyard, then like you actually just run them out of it, and that's what actually happened once. So pretty good stuff. And Manriki Gusari, this just trashes Hammer Time so bad. It's so nice to have. It's also just pretty good against opposing Stoneforge decks, at least if they get an equipment first. An equipment that destroys other equipment is surprisingly good. So yeah, that's Blink Blade. March for the World Light is as nutty in this deck, if anything more so, because we have a lot of white cards we could pitch, which hasn't really come up yet, but there will be some times where I'm sure pitching white cards will be the right call, and then it will be really awesome that we have the ability to do that. But just like it's nutty in the red-white burn decks, it's also nutty here. And Solitude, I mean, enough said. Especially we can exile, with the evoke trigger on the stack Ephemerate. So, exile one creature from the first time the ability came out, but then with the evoke trigger on the stack, Ephemerate it. So then the exile effect happens again, and then we even get a third use if they have another creature on the battlefield. So really cool stuff. Yeah. Anyway, pretty cool stuff. Let's see. So we got the last deck. Okay, I call this. First one is mono white Blink Blade. This one I'm going to call mono white Blink Budget. So I also kind of feel like Urza Saga is good, and Urza Saga might even be the better way to take this deck, but it's both not necessary, and the format is surprisingly prepared for Urza Saga, and like there's just something to be said, I think, about a budget deck in a way. So like this. The other deck has a lot of pricey cards. This deck actually has the ability to really help. This potentially can be a good budget deck. And obviously we went 3-2 in our last league. And I know from personal experience, sometimes we just win with Castle Arnvale. Cave is great. Field is great. We all know. It's just Secluded Steppe, simple cycling land. It is very good. And yeah. Mishra's Bauble, Soul Guide Lantern, both, just good for main deck graveyard hate, but also good to have artifacts that we can bring back with Leonin Squire. And why is Leonin Squire good in this deck? Well, we're not playing Stoneforge Mystic, and I just like to have more blink targets, and this card, it's more aggressive than Stoneforge, and, kind of just draws a card most of the time, because most of the time getting one of these cards back is, just kind of really sweet, especially Soul Guide Lantern in gets matchups where the graveyard matters because you get multiple uses out of it. Path to Exile, enough said. I mean, we already know it's one of the best removal spells ever printed. Draven Inspector, this card can also be blinked, so there's that. Roll of Omens, same thing, it can be blinked. Winds of Abandon, this deck does not play Solitude, it's a little pricey, but Winds of Abandon, man, this card is underplayed either as a main deck card or a sideboard card, and this is fully main deckable, I think. But man, if I had a nickel for every time I overloaded this and did a one-sided Wrath, well, I mean, I definitely have over 20 cents. How much more than 20 cents? I don't know, but it would have happened at least 4 times if I had a nickel, I think. So 20 cents or more. Yeah, and then the Flicker Wisp. Flicker Wisp is mostly for just drawing an extra card off a Wall of Omens if that's in play, or recurring another artifact with Leonin Squire if that's in play, and if we actually had an artifact to recur, or just getting another treasure token if there were specters around. So it's just, good stuff. I like Flicker Wisp. Dreadnought Magistrate, I mean, this card is kind of acting as both a rest in peace, at least against Timor Living End, while also being pretty decent against basically any Cascade deck. But it is worth noting, actually, that I know they can probably just bolt it, but this actually really messes with Light Up the Stage and those type of effects, so there's that too. Also, Dredge, they can't play stuff out of the graveyard, so no conflagrates for you and whatnot. And Settle the Records, just like the other version. I don't know what to say. Core Firewalker, just like the red deck. I mean, just the red hate on this card is unreal, and we do need this instead of Core Sanctifying Back in this deck specifically, because Sanctifying Back doesn't really do jack much against burn. Yeah, it stalls their attacks a bit, but just burn us out. This kind of prevents the burnout because of the life gain, so this is way better. It doesn't single-handedly win the game, not always, but enough times that I think it's well worth the inclusion. So the record, like I said, same thing as the other deck. And Sorcerer Spyglass. Now this could be Pithing Needle, but this is Sorcerer Spyglass because what sucks is if they play Chalice on 1, then it hits our Pithing Needle. And since hitting Chalice 1 seems like kind of the way to go, well, at least the way they could go, I think Social Spyglass is kind of better. Plus, it can name whatever they have. It's never to be underestimated. And with that, I think I have gone over all the decks. Boy, this has taken almost 3 hours. So with that said, let's go to the shout out section. So, you know, thanks a lot to my patrons, and I know I haven't had a lot of new content lately, but hey, you know, hopefully this video shows that I am still around. I'm still planning to make videos. I'm hoping that my next video, I've got a number of trophy leagues actually that I still want to share. Some of them I don't have the audio yet because they were recorded without audio first, so I have to dub over it. But I think some of them actually already do have audio, but I need to record the deck tech and I need to process it. But I think that I should have some stuff very soon. And then after that, I won't have all of these versions just yet. I mean immediately, but I will definitely have some new stuff coming up soon for those of you who were waiting for more content from me. I've got it coming up. But thanks to all the patrons. You know, it definitely means a lot. It will never stop meaning a lot. Thank you a lot to 3Dime. Thank you a lot, Stanley. Thank you a lot, Magnus. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Cole. Thanks, Brent T. MTG. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Courtesy. Thanks, Gracie Choirboy. Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Lucas. Thanks, Yuha. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Rodrigo. Thanks, Gabriel. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jonas. Thanks, Alexis. Thanks, Brett. And thanks, Michael Patton. Oh, yeah, and I forgot to say, shout out to Brett. Brett here on both Twitter and I think on YouTube. Certainly appreciated that you're a patron, but also thank you, Brett, for suggesting Atsushi, the Blazing Sky. While that card may not have necessarily panned out in most of the versions of the deck, it actually is being surprisingly solid in the Double Dragon deck. So thanks a lot for that suggestion. I kind of hope that it ends up even being better than Chandra. I don't know if I should at some point chest the Chandra, but hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and I've been liking the way it plays with Atsushi. So thanks a lot for that suggestion. I think Atsushi has done a lot of good work for me. So all right, and that makes it so that we are basically we finally did our shout out. We finally did our analysis, and this video is long enough as is, so I don't think I'm gonna do much more other than to say that I guess I will just briefly talk about what I think about the Luris ban. I don't think it was necessary, but at the same time, I think the game might be better off for it than not. And this is one of the rare cases where it's a card that doesn't necessarily cause any one particular deck to become dominant, but it is a little oppressive in the sense that it warps the deck building so much around it that it kind of I don't know. It's hard to explain. Other than just yeah. Ironically, it's just so powerful. It just gives you so much of an incentive to cut, like a few 3 drops or higher if you had them in your deck, 3 permanent drops that it doesn't even counter red instant adversaries. I just feel like it just incentivizes you so much not to have more than 3 converted mana cost cards, and it just fits into so many different types of decks that can barely splash white or black for it. Yeah, that it kind of warps a lot of decks, and I could see how Wizards, just felt like that wasn't particularly good for the game, even though it didn't make one deck in particular too overpowered. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. I actually kind of like Luris because our decks generally did pretty well against them, especially as we usually came prepared with Graveyard Hate to get at Luris. But I can see why it was banned, and people still play Graveyard-based cards, so our Graveyard Hate still maybe gives us an edge. Anyway, thank you everybody. I hope you all enjoyed this. Hopefully I'll have some new gameplay footage soon. I have some stuff that is almost ready to go. So thank you everybody. Take care and have a good one.